Chapter 430. He had cultivated a ghostly body. The middle-aged man looked at Yi Xian with a burning desire and greed in his eyes. Yi Xian walked towards the middle-aged man with his sword in hand. "I wonder how many more saint-level experts your ghoul sect has." The middle-aged man sneered. "The world fears you, Yi Xian, but the ghoul sect isn't." As soon as he said that, he lifted his brush and pointed it at Yi Xian. In an instant, a black dot appeared in the space before Yi Xian. Soon, the black dot expanded rapidly and engulfed Yi Xian in the blink of an eye. However, the black dot suddenly disappeared. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes. "You can repair space? How is that possible?" As he spoke, a spot of sword gleam suddenly appeared in front of him. The middle-aged man lifted his brush and pointed it at the sword gleam. Boom! The sword gleam shattered and Yi Xian retreated rapidly. The middle-aged man performed a hand seal with his left hand and drew a line at Yi Xian with his right hand. Horizontal destruction. A black gleam flashed across the battlefield. Yi Xian raised his sword to block it. Bang! Yi Xian retreated rapidly once again. This time, the distance between him and the middle-aged man was completely widened. The middle-aged man glanced at Yi Xian's trembling hand. "I didn't expect your sword Dao to be so powerful and your physical body to be so terrifying." As soon as he said that, he lifted his brush vertically and then horizontally. Split. As soon as he said that, the space around Yi Xian began to disintegrate. At that moment, Yi Xian felt as though his body was being pulled by thousands of horses. Yi Xian was shocked. He hurriedly took out the space Dao Law. In the next moment, the space around him was restored, but his face was extremely pale. The middle-aged man narrowed his eyes. "You used an external object to repair space." At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. This time, a scabbard appeared in his left hand. When he arrived before the middle-aged man, he drew his sword and slashed. Buzz! A sword chime shook the sky. At this moment, the space around the middle-aged man was directly shattered by the sword cry. Below the sword, the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically when he sensed the sword, and he immediately blocked it with his brush. Bang! The ground beneath the middle-aged man's feet cracked, but he managed to block Yi Xian's sword. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly raised his sword and slashed again. Bang! As the sword fell, the middle-aged man retreated several hundred feet. As soon as he stopped, a sword quietly flew out from the space in front of him. The middle-aged man's eyes narrowed as he clamped the sword between his fingers. However, right at this moment, a black flying sword suddenly pierced through his chest. Yin Spiritual Energy Sword. At this moment, Yi Xian took out the Yin Spiritual Energy Sword. Because he knew that if he had taken out the Yin Spiritual Energy Sword from the very beginning, his opponent would definitely be able to block it. The person in front of him was too strong. The timing of the release of the Yin Spiritual Energy Sword must be grasped because he only had one chance. When the Yin Spiritual Energy Sword pierced through the middle-aged man's chest, Yi Xian didn't stop there. Countless energy swords quietly condensed around him, and in the next moment, all these energy swords arrived in front of the middle-aged man. However, the middle-aged man disappeared into thin air. Yi Xian suddenly turned his head. 100 feet to his right, the middle-aged man was standing there, and at this moment, there were two old men standing on both sides of him. They were all in the sage realm. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. The middle-aged man looked down at his chest, which was rapidly rotting. After a moment of silence, the middle-aged man looked up at Yi Xian. "Celestial Artifact Level Sword. How many treasures do you have?" At this moment he was a little aggrieved. Yi Xian's strength was indeed monstrous to the point that he was a little shocked. However, the difference between Yi Xian and his realm was too big. It could be said that it was impossible for Yi Xian to defeat him. However, the problem was that Yi Xian had too many treasures. Previously, when Yi Xian took out the black sword, he was already extremely afraid of it. Now he took out another sword, and this sword was a celestial artifact. Moreover, he knew that Yi Xian definitely had more treasures of this level. Yi Xian walked towards the middle-aged man with the sword in his hand. "Let me see how many more sage state powerhouses your ghost sect has." As soon as he finished speaking, a golden armor suddenly appeared on his body. Along with the appearance of this golden armor, the entire god set appeared. At this moment, his aura skyrocketed again. Seeing this scene, the middle-aged man's face turned extremely ugly. Seeing this, he said, "Celestial artifact again. Celestial artifact again." At this moment, the two old men next to the middle-aged man also looked a little ugly. Although they were sage state powerhouses, they didn't dare to underestimate celestial artifact level equipment. Moreover, Yi Xian had taken out so many of them at once. Next to the middle-aged man, an old man said in a low voice, "Guardian Yu Tian, inform the sect leader." The middle-aged man called Yu Tian spoke in a low voice, "The sect leader isn't in the heaven region." The old man spoke in a low voice, "Look down." Yu Tian turned around to look down the mountain. The old man was being completely suppressed by the imperial hound, and it could be said that the old man's defeat was only a matter of time. The old man's expression was quite unsightly. "Exalt Qin will be able to hold on for an hour at most. At that time, once that demon beast is free, then we won't be a match for Yi Xian. We must inform the sect leader." Yu Tian glanced at Yi Xian. "If the three of us join forces, then would we be able to kill him in a short period of time?" The old man shook his head and felt slightly helpless. "He's wearing a set of celestial artifact level equipment, so it's impossible for us to kill him in a short period of time. Moreover, Guardian Yu, your body is still rotting away and your strength has decreased greatly. Besides that, we don't know what other trump cards he has, so it's extremely disadvantageous for us if this continues. Either we call the sect leader or activate the defensive formation." Yu Tian fell silent for a moment before he said, "Activate the defensive formation." The old man frowned slightly. "Why aren't we calling him the sect leader?" Yu Tian shook his head. "The sect leader isn't in the heaven region. He's headed to the Great Wall of Heaven Burial. The Eternal Palace Mistress is standing guard there, so it's impossible to send a voice transmission there. Moreover, if we send a voice transmission there and the Eternal Palace Mistress finds out, then we'll be in even more trouble. Moreover, the sect leader doesn't want the Eternal Palace Mistress to know that he's headed to the Great Wall of Heaven Burial." The old man spoke in a low voice, "Then activate the defensive formation." Yu Tian nodded, and then he turned around to glance at the door. "Activate the formation." As soon as he finished speaking, the entire ghost mountain suddenly trembled violently. It didn't take long for rays of black light to drift out from the surroundings of the mountain, and there were countless evil spirits within the black light. Yi Xian stopped in the distance and he frowned slightly. "It's the myriad ghost formation." Astounded voices resounded in the surroundings. "The ghost sect has actually activated the myriad ghost formation. Can it not be activated? This Yi Xian has a full set of divine equipment, and the Saint Realm experts can't do anything to him. If they continue to fight him head-on, the ghost sect's Saint Realm experts will be wiped out. I didn't expect Yi Xian's strength to be so strong, and he has so many treasures on him. This person's background is not simple. Let's continue watching. This chapter is not finished, please continue to the next page. Let's see how he's going to deal with the myriad ghost formation of the ghost sect." On the other side, Mu Zhou of the Baishao Pavilion looked at Yi Xian below, and no one knew what he was thinking. Below, the entire ghost mountain began to tremble violently, and countless evil spirits floated out from the tombs on the ghost mountain, and finally gathered at the peak of the ghost mountain. At this moment, the entire peak of the ghost mountain was filled with evil spirits. These evil spirits were staring at Yi Xian below, and their eyes were filled with greed. Yi Xian was silent. It was the first time he had seen so many evil spirits, and it was not just an ordinary number, but also very strong. At this moment, an excited voice suddenly sounded in his mind, "Young lord, let me do it, let me do it." It was Little Soul's voice. Yi Xian was stunned. Little Soul said again, "Young lord, you don't know, I can collect all these souls." Yi Xian was stunned and then quickly said, "Then come out and collect them quickly." Little Soul said, "There's no hurry, there are still countless evil spirits in this earth, and it won't be too late for me to come out when they are released." Yi Xian thought for a moment and then looked up at Yu Tian, who was not far away, and sneered, "This is your ghost sect's 1,000 ghost formation? I think it's only SOSO. As he said this, he raised his sword, and an evil spirit on the right was directly chopped into pieces by this sword. Yu Tian stared at Yi Xian. "Is that so?" As he said this, he gently stomped his right foot, and soon the ground below suddenly cracked, and then more and more evil spirits flew out from the depths of the earth, and soon the entire ghost mountain was filled with all kinds of evil spirits. At the same time, a blood-red halo appeared under Yi Xian's feet, and countless amounts of blood began to gather towards this halo. Yi Xian glanced at the blood-red halo under his feet, and Little Soul suddenly said, "Young lord, don't worry, this blood is the blood of these evil spirits when they were alive, and they are using this blood to imprison you. Young lord, don't worry, I will absorb all this blood later. I can feel that they are about to release all the evil spirits underground. Please wait a moment, young lord." Yi Xian nodded slightly, "Okay." As he said this, he turned his head and looked down. The Emperor Hound and the old man were still fighting, but at this moment the old man was losing ground and could only passively defend. Delay. He now wanted to delay until the Emperor Hound came out, because he was not sure if the ghost sect had any backup plans. At this thought, Yi Xian looked up at Yu Tian. I have no enmity with the ghost sect. Why do they want to capture my sister? Yu Tian said coldly, who knows that she is your sister? Of course, even if we knew, with her unique physique, the ghost sect will not give up. Yi Xian slowly clenched his right hand and his expression was calm. How is she now? Just as Yu Tian was about to speak, the old man beside him suddenly said, he is buying time. Hearing this, Yu Tian was shocked. He glanced at the Emperor Hound and the old man, and then turned to look at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, pay for your ignorance. As he said this, he formed a seal with both hands and silently said, all ghosts, listen to my command, devour. As he said this, he formed a seal with both hands towards Yi Xian. In an instant, all the evil spirits in the entire ghost mountain were like hungry dogs pouncing on Yi Xian, who was in the blood formation in the distance. At this moment, the sky changed color. Yi Xian was expressionless, and just as the evil spirits approached him, Yi Xian suddenly took out a sword and pointed it at the sky. Collect. The soul-suppressing sword trembled slightly and in an instant. P.S. Ask for a prostitute. Any prostitute will do. End of this chapter. Chapter 431. The moment Yi Xian's voice fell, the soul-suppressing sword in his hand trembled violently. Then, like a whirlpool, it sucked in all the evil souls in the surroundings. For a moment, countless miserable cries rang out from the top of Ghost Mountain. In the distance, Yu Tian and the others were stunned. Not only Yu Tian and the others but everyone in the surroundings was also stunned. When everyone regained their senses, all the evil souls in the surroundings had been absorbed by the soul-suppressing sword. Yi Xian held the soul-suppressing sword in his hand. At this moment he felt countless resentment and miserable cries coming from the soul-suppressing sword. The soul-suppressing sword's somewhat excited voice suddenly sounded, "Thank you, young master. Some of these evil souls are not bad. After I devour them, I will choose a few to refine into yin souls. Young master, take care." With that, the soul-suppressing sword disappeared. Yi Xian. In the distance, Yu Tian suddenly said angrily, "Yi Xian, what did you do?" Yi Xian raised his head to look at Yu Tian. "Why did you ask such a stupid question?" As his voice fell, he suddenly disappeared. Yu Tian's expression changed drastically as he retreated. Meanwhile, the two old men beside him suddenly rushed out. Bang bang. Two explosions rang out and the two Saint Realm experts retreated rapidly. Seeing this scene, Yu Tian's expression changed. He was about to make a move, but a sharp pain came from his abdomen. He looked down at his abdomen. At this moment, his abdomen had already been corroded into a huge hole. "I can't make a move." Yu Tian hurriedly stopped. If he made a move now, his injuries would become even more serious. At this moment, Yi Xian appeared in front of the two elders again. 1 against 2. The two Sage Realm powerhouses could not do anything to Yi Xian. If Yi Xian did not wear that set of god armor, they still had a chance. However, after Yi Xian wore that set of god armor, they realized that they could not do anything to Yi Xian at all. Yi Xian was wearing a set of god armor. Moreover, what they feared the most was Yi Xian's spiritual chi sword, because they didn't know when this sword would appear. Right at that moment, a huge explosion suddenly sounded out from the foot of the mountain. Qin Zun, who was fighting with the Emperor Hound, was sent flying and smashed heavily against the mountain wall. Boom. That part of the mountain wall directly collapsed. Just as the Emperor Dog was about to make a move, Qin Zun turned around and fled. His speed was extremely fast, and in the blink of an eye he had escaped to the top of the mountain. Yu Tian was about to speak when Qin Zun suddenly said, "Retreat." With that, he flew straight into the gate of hell. Yu Tian was taken aback for a moment, then he too turned around and entered the ghost gate. The other two Saint Realm experts also wanted to escape, but Yi Xian didn't give them the chance. He firmly entangled the two Saint Realm experts, and when the Sovereign Hound arrived, two miserable shrieks suddenly resounded from the peak of Ghost Mountain. The two saints were killed by the Emperor Hound's claws, and their souls were taken away by Yi Xian's soul-suppressing sword. At that moment, the surroundings were incomparably quiet. In the dark, Mu Zhou of the 100 Shao Pavilion looked at Yi Xian below, and his heart suddenly felt a lingering fear. At that moment he finally understood why Yi Xian was so arrogant in the 100 Shao Pavilion. He had the confidence to back it up. If the 100 Shao Pavilion had fought with Yi Xian at that time, even if they won in the end, it would have been a Pyrrhic victory. And if the 100 Shao Pavilion lost too much, they would undoubtedly be swallowed up by other forces the next day. As if thinking of something, Mu Zhou turned to the side, "Pass down my order, bring Lady Xian to the 100 Shao Pavilion, and let the pavilion protect her well." Yes. In the dark, a black shadow quietly retreated. Below, Yi Xian walked to the ghost gate with the Emperor Hound, and Yi Xian slashed down with his sword. Sizzle, sizzle, as the sword slashed down, sparks and sword chi flew everywhere. However, the good ghost gate was completely fine. Yi Xian frowned. He looked at the Emperor Hound, and the Emperor Hound slashed forward with its claws. Boom. The ghost gate shook violently, but that was all. The Emperor Hound frowned. "This gate is not simple." Yi Xian opened his right hand, and the immortal spirit sword in his hand turned into a Yin spirit sword, and in the next moment he stabbed out. Boom. The ghost gate shook again, and Yi Xian retreated several feet. Yi Xian frowned, a little shocked. He did not expect that even the Yin spirit sword could not hurt it. After all, this Yin spirit sword was an immortal weapon. The Emperor Hound said, "This gate is a little special. I'm afraid only your soul-suppressing sword can break it." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Xiaohun, can you break this thing?" A moment later, Xiaohun said, "No." Yi Xian was shocked. "Even you can't?" Xiaohun said, "It's not that I can't, but young lord is not strong enough to use my full strength." "Yi Xian," Xiaohun said, "this thing is extremely extraordinary. Even if young lord is able to use my full strength, he may not be able to break it." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Then do you have a way to let us in?" Xiaohun fell silent for a moment and then said, "If young lord wants to go in, there are only two ways. The first is to make them let you in, and the second is to use the sword at the top of the pagoda. That sword can break this gate." Yi Xian shook his head. Neither of these methods would work. Especially the second one, he was still unable to use that sword. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly thought of something. The Space Dao Law. Yi Xian hurriedly used the Space Dao Law, and using it, Yi Xian quickly sensed the spatial structure around the good gate and the space inside it. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly turned to look at the Emperor Hound. "Let's go." As he spoke, he grabbed the Emperor Hound's shoulder, and in the next moment, he and the Emperor Hound disappeared. After Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound disappeared, some people suddenly appeared on the scene, and all of them looked at the gate. Is this fellow going to destroy the ghost gate? Who knows? Think about the Dugu and Gu families. The ghost gate isn't weak. Can he destroy it? Let's wait and see. Mu Zhou stared fixedly at the gate below. If Yi Xian won today, then there was no doubt that many people would come looking for trouble with Yi Xian in the future. But if Yi Xian lost or fled, then those people in the dark might make a move. The price was huge, but the temptation was huge as well. Even the Bai Shao Pavilion was still observing. If it was necessary, the 100-Nose Pavilion would make a move as well. Of course, the premise was that Yi Xian had many trump cards up his sleeves. A single demon beast was far from enough to dispel these people's hopes. Now they just had to see if Yi Xian could come out alive. Yi Xian used the law of space to directly travel through the space of the gate. Although this gate had an extraordinary origin, it did not exceed the scope of the law of space. Soon Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound appeared in front of a stone staircase. In front of the two of them was a stone staircase that extended all the way to the top of the mountain. At the top of the mountain there was a black hall. In the middle of the hall, a blood-red talisman was stuck on the top. Yi Xian said softly, "This should be their lair." The Emperor Hound glanced around. It was extremely dark and emitted a black mist. It was extremely strange. The Emperor Hound said in a low voice, "Be careful. This sect is not simple." Yi Xian nodded slightly. At this point, he had already realized that the Ghost Gate might be stronger than the Gu family. Of course, the Gu family was not weak either. It was just that they had encountered a monster like Zhen Zizai. If he had not encountered Zhen Zizai, it would have been impossible for him to destroy the Gu family even if he used the World Prison Pagoda. Therefore, Yi Xian was very clear about his own strength. Now that he was facing the Ghost Gate, although he had the help of the Emperor Hound, he still did not dare to be careless. Yi Xian carried his sword and walked towards the Ghost Gate in the distance. At this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared not far in front of Yi Xian. The black shadow was like a shadow and was extremely strange. The black shadow said, "Yi Xian, how did you come in?" There was a deep sense of confusion in its voice. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Kill it." The Emperor Hound was stunned and then said, "Don't you want to chat first?" Yi Xian was expressionless. "Chat about what? About life?" The Emperor Hound blinked. That seems to be the case. As soon as it finished speaking, it leaped. In the distance, the black shadow said angrily, "Yi Xian, you have gone too far. You," boom. As the Emperor Hound rushed over, the black shadow directly exploded. The Emperor Hound frowned slightly. "That's not the main body." Yi Xian raised his head and looked at the end of the stone steps in the distance. At this moment, Qin Zun and Yu Tian were looking down at him from there. Yi Xian carried his sword and walked up the stone steps. The Emperor Hound hurriedly followed him. On the stone steps, Yi Xian's sword dragged along the stone steps. With every step he took, his sword would leave a deep mark on the stone steps. At the end of the stone steps, Yu Tian stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, you still have a chance to live if you leave now." Yi Xian said, "They are buying time. Kill them." As soon as he finished speaking, he sped up and arrived before Yu Tian and Qin Zun in practically the blink of an eye. The latter's expressions changed drastically. Qin Zun suddenly slapped his palm down, and the space before him was directly shattered. Before Yi Xian's sword could arrive, the Emperor Hound directly slapped Qin Zun's palm with its claw. Bang! The space around them cracked apart while Qin Zun retreated repeatedly. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly appeared above Qin Zun, and then he suddenly slashed his sword down towards Qin Zun. Qin Zun's expression changed drastically when he witnessed this scene, and he roared furiously as he punched towards Yi Xian's sword. As he punched out, a powerful soul power gushed out from his fist like a volcanic eruption. However, a ferocious smile arose on the corners of Yi Xian's mouth. Yu Tian suddenly spoke with horror, "Quickly retract your soul energy. Quickly." He hadn't even finished speaking when Qin Zun's soul energy was instantly shattered, and then a sword stabbed into the center of Qin Zun's forehead. However, Qin Zun didn't die just like that. At the same time that Yi Xian's sword stabbed into his stomach, he slapped his palm against Yi Xian's stomach. Bang! Yi Xian was blasted, flying like a kite that had its string cut, while Qin Zun retreated repeatedly. As he retreated, his body and soul were directly separated. Moreover, once his soul was separated, it instantly started to fade at a visible speed. Qin Zun was slightly dazed, and then he gazed at Yu Tian. "Why didn't you stop him?" Yu Tian fell silent for a moment and then he said, "I forgot." Qin Zun was speechless. Chapter 432. Qin Zun's soul was becoming more and more illusory. He knew that he did not have much time left. In this last bit of time he turned to look at Yi Xian. "The old man did not lose to you, no?" As his voice fell, he disappeared completely. Qin Zun no longer existed in this world. Yi Xian naturally knew what Qin Zun meant. If the Emperor Hound had not interfered at the beginning, he would not have been able to kill Qin Zun. It could be said that half of the credit for Qin Zun's death was due to the Emperor Hound. Of course, this was meaningless to him, because he did not come here to compete but to kill. He would not be stupid enough to fight the Emperor Hound alone. He would only think of how to kill the Emperor Hound. Yi Xian turned to look at Yu Tian, who was not far away. The latter's expression changed greatly and he directly retreated to the entrance of the palace. He stared at Yi Xian. "Yi Xian, I Hellgate." Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. Yu Tian, who was speaking, suddenly changed his expression. He flashed backward and then pointed upwards. The blood-red talisman suddenly floated down from the top of the palace. In the distance, Yi Xian frowned slightly, and a bad feeling arose in his heart. At this moment, the blood-red talisman suddenly turned into a ball of fire and exploded. Then a black shadow flashed out from within. Yi Xian's expression changed greatly. He raised his sword to block. Bang! With a muffled sound, Yi Xian directly retreated to the bottom of the stone steps. The black figure once again rushed towards Yi Xian. But at this moment, the Emperor Hound suddenly leaped up and collided with it. Boom! In the field, a muffled sound suddenly resounded. In the next moment, the Emperor Hound retreated in front of Yi Xian. Seeing this, Yi Xian's expression suddenly became serious. He looked up at the top of the stone steps. At the top of the stone steps stood a man with his upper body naked. The man's face was ferocious, and his upper body was covered in bloody cracks. His hands were full of sharp nails. The man stared at the Monarch Hound below, his mouth twitching uncontrollably as black liquid flowed out of his mouth. Yi Xian said, "Senior Emperor Hound, shall I leave this to you?" The Emperor Dog nodded slightly. "Be careful." As soon as it finished speaking, the Emperor Hound charged forward. Meanwhile, the man at the end of the stone steps suddenly roared, and then he flew down and smashed directly towards the Emperor Hound. "Take it head on." Boom! Up in the sky, the man and the beast collided and the entire space trembled. Immediately after, the man and the beast both retreated. However, the Emperor Dog quickly charged forward again. It was obvious that the Emperor Hound was stronger in terms of physical strength. Seeing that the Emperor Hound had the upper hand, Yi Xian relaxed a little. He raised his head to look at Yu Tian, who was not far away. Just as the latter was about to speak, Yi Xian's right foot suddenly tapped lightly against the ground. His entire body floated up. When he reappeared, he was already in front of Yu Tian. He unsheathed his sword. Slash. Seeing the sword slash over, Yu Tian's face fell. He stomped his right foot and punched out with his fist. Bang! The fist and sword collided. Yu Tian instantly retreated explosively, and he retreated directly into the palace. On the other hand, Yi Xian moved over 300 m back as well. However, just as Yi Xian was retreating, a black sword light suddenly flashed across the battlefield. Within the palace, Yu Tian's expression instantly changed when he noticed this ray of light, and he hurriedly dodged to the side. However, he was still slightly too slow, and a ray of light pierced through his shoulder. A sword of spirit energy. When Yu Tian stopped moving, he hurriedly looked at his shoulder. At this moment, his shoulder was swiftly rotting away. Yu Tian's expression instantly became ferocious when he witnessed this scene, and he raised his head to look towards Qin Shi. It was Yi Xian in the distance, but Yi Xian had vanished. Yu Tian's pupils constricted abruptly, and then he pressed his palms together. Pardon? As soon as he finished speaking, his palms parted, and a ghostly soul suddenly flew out from within his palms. In the next moment, it opened its bloody mouth and bit at Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't dodge at all, and he just stabbed with his sword. A sword of soul fixation. As soon as the soul came into contact with this sword, it instantly let out a shrill cry, and then it retreated explosively. However, it hadn't even retreated a few steps when its body directly became illusory. Yi Xian turned around, and Yu Tian had already vanished. You escape? Yi Xian's expression was slightly ferocious. Do you think you can escape? As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian suddenly slashed forward with his sword. A ray of light shot out from the tip of his sword. Bang! This sword directly smashed the entire palace into pieces. However, Yi Xian didn't stop, and he charged towards the distance with his sword in hand. When he charged to the rear, some of the ghoul sect's disciples instantly started fleeing. However, Yi Xian didn't choose to let these ghoul sect's disciples go, and countless energy swords ceaselessly slashed through the palace. In next to no time, shrill cries resounded incessantly in the palace. Yi Xian held his sword as he charged madly, and his expression was ferocious. Ghoul sect, where's my sister? As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly slashed towards the right. A ray of sword light flew out, and several tens of feet away, a ghost shadow was directly slashed into pieces. Not long after, Yi Xian arrived at a dark graveyard. Just as he was about to rush in, an angry roar suddenly sounded from the side. Presumptuous. Yi Xian, this is the ancestral shrine of the ghoul sect, you. All of a sudden Yi Xian roared, your ancestor. As soon as he finished speaking, he dashed forward and slashed down with his sword. The expression of the person who spoke changed greatly. Just as he was about to speak, a voice sounded from the side. Retreat. However, as soon as the voice sounded, Yi Xian's sword slashed down from the top of a man's head. The man's body was directly split into two, and blood splattered all over the ground. Yi Xian turned around and looked not far away. Yu Tian was there, and at this moment, only half of Yu Tian's body was left. Yu Tian glared at Yi Xian. Yi Xian pointed at Yu Tian with his sword. Where's my sister? Yu Tian said ferociously, Yi Xian, if you kill one more person, I'll make sure your sister begs for death. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly dashed forward. At this moment, his speed was extremely fast because he used the Space Dao Law. When Yi Xian dashed over, Yu Tian's expression changed greatly. He decisively abandoned his physical body and retreated with his soul. Boom. As soon as Yu Tian's soul retreated, his physical body directly exploded. Seeing this, Yu Tian's expression turned extremely ugly. He looked at Yi Xian in the distance with an incomparably ferocious expression. Yi Xian, do you not care about your sister's life anymore? Yi Xian didn't speak any nonsense. He once again dashed towards Yu Tian. Seeing this, Yu Tian's expression changed greatly and he hurriedly said, your sister is still alive. She's still alive. We haven't refined her into a ghost body yet. However, Yi Xian didn't stop. He was extremely fast. Seeing that Yi Xian didn't stop, Yu Tian was horrified and hurriedly retreated. He roared angrily, Yi Xian, are you crazy? Your sister is still alive. She's still alive. At this point he didn't continue speaking, because Yi Xian was getting closer and closer to him. Yu Tian couldn't care less and immediately retreated rapidly. With his full strength, he instantly pulled apart the distance between him and Yi Xian. The current him naturally didn't dare to fight with Yi Xian. If he fought with Yi Xian now, he would undoubtedly die. Yi Xian's sword and sword skills were too effective against spirits. Yu Tian was extremely aggrieved. If Yi Xian's sword and sword skills weren't so effective against the Hellgate, then no matter how monstrous Yi Xian was, he wouldn't be a match for him. The reason he lost was because Yi Xian's sword and sword skills were too effective against him. In the battlefield, Yi Xian chased madly with his sword in hand. When he saw that he couldn't catch up to Yu Tian, he turned around and started to chase after the disciples of the Hellgate. It wasn't long before the battlefield was covered in corpses. Yu Tian's expression was extremely unsightly as he gazed at the corpses on the ground. He hadn't expected that the Hellgate would actually be forced to such an extent by Yi Xian and his dog. Right at this moment, an explosion suddenly resounded from nearby, and it didn't take long for a figure to crash down in front of him. It was the man who fought the Imperial Hound earlier. Yu Tian raised his head and looked into the distance. The Imperial Hound slowly walked over. It glanced at the man in front of Yu Tian and said in disdain, "So you're using a secret technique to stimulate your physical body's potential. No wonder you're able to fight against me." As it spoke, it looked at Yu Tian and was about to attack. Yu Tian suddenly turned around and looked at Yi Xian, who was still crazily slaughtering not far away. "Yi Xian, I'll bring you to see your sister." Not far away, Yi Xian suddenly stopped, but the next moment he waved his right hand and a ray of sword light slashed out. A few dozen feet away, the head of a Hellgate disciple flew into the air. Yi Xian gently used his fingers to guide the flying sword back to his hand. He turned around and walked towards Yu Tian. This time, Yu Tian didn't retreat because with the Imperial Hound around, there was nowhere for him to retreat. Yi Xian was expressionless. He stopped in front of Yu Tian. "Where?" Yu Tian looked at Yi Xian. "Follow me." After saying that, he turned around and left. Yi Xian followed. The Imperial Hound turned its head and looked into the distance. There were corpses all over the ground, and the souls of these corpses were no longer there. This was not the main point. The main point was that every corpse had died in an extremely cruel manner. The Imperial Hound shook its head slightly. At this moment, it realized that although Yi Xian was usually cheeky and thick-skinned, when he was angry he could really be crazy. Explosive temper. The Imperial Hound chuckled and followed. It also had a bad temper. Before, it didn't particularly like Yi Xian because Yi Xian was always cheeky and had no temper at all. But now, it realized that this guy actually had a temper and it was especially violent. Soon, under Yu Tian's lead, Yi Xian and the Imperial Hound arrived at the foot of a mountain. Yu Tian looked up and saw some coffins floating halfway up the mountain. There weren't many, only about a dozen of them. Yi Xian also looked up at those coffins and said softly, "Is she inside?" Yu Tian said in a low voice, "When we brought her here, we wanted to immediately refine her into a ghost body. However, we discovered that her constitution isn't as simple as we thought. She might have a double constitution or a hidden constitution. In short, it's very special. It can be said that this kind of constitution is truly one in a million. Therefore, we didn't dare to make a decision on our own, so we kept her and prepared to wait for the sect master to return before making a decision. However, we didn't expect." At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly turned around and slashed down with his sword. One of Yu Tian's arms was sent flying. Yi Xian held his sword across Yu Tian's neck and roared, "Cut the F*** king crap. Where is she?" Yu Tian. "P.S. Thank you all for your gifts and votes yesterday. I want to read them all. Also, I will make time to read your comments every day. Thank you all for your support." Chapter 433. Looking at Yi Xian in front of him, Yu Tian knew that Yi Xian was on the verge of breaking down. At times like this kind of person could do anything. Yu Tian quickly pointed to a coffin in the air. "That's it." As soon as his voice fell, Yi Xian had already appeared in front of the coffin. He raised his sword and the coffin lid flew out. He walked to the coffin and saw a little girl lying quietly in the coffin. This person was Yi Ling. At this moment, Yi Ling was lying quietly with her eyes closed. There was a talisman between her eyebrows, and there was a strange aura floating around her. Yi Xian looked at Yi Ling in the coffin, and tears instantly flowed out. In this life, he had only cried for one person, and that was Yi Ling. Looking at Yi Ling in the coffin, Yi Xian's hands could not help but tremble. He gently tore the talisman on Yi Ling's head, but Yi Ling still did not wake up. Yi Xian was stunned. The next moment he suddenly turned around and flew down. In the blink of an eye he was in front of Yu Tian. He pointed his sword between Yu Tian's eyebrows and roared, "Why is she not awake?" Yu Tian said in a deep voice, "She is now in the stage of soul nurturing and her soul is in a dormant state." Yi Xian was expressionless. "Wake her up." Yu Tian shook his head, "Not for now." Yi Xian thrust his sword forward. Yu Tian's soul instantly became a little illusory. Yu Tian quickly said, "Even if you kill me you can't wake her up. Her soul is in a dormant state. If you forcibly wake her up now, her soul will become incomplete, and it will lead to irreversible consequences." Speaking of this, he looked at Yi Xian. "If you want to wake her up, you can only use the exclusive secret technique of my ghoul gate. Now that my physical body has been shattered, it is impossible for me to use this secret technique. Now, everyone in Ghoul Gate who can use the secret technique has been killed by you." Yi Xian was silent. Yu Tian glanced at Yi Xian and said, "There's another way, which is to use you as a medium and use it through you." Just then, Soul's voice suddenly sounded in Yi Xian's mind. "Young master, I can wake her up." As soon as Soul's voice fell, Yi Xian thrust his sword through Yu Tian's head. Yu Tian looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. "You?" Yi Xian turned around and flew to the coffin. He looked at Yi Ling in the coffin and said softly, "Little Hun, can you wake her up?" Soul said, "Yes, young mistress, but it will take time." "Young mistress, I will put her into the sword." As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Ling in the coffin turned into a black light and disappeared. Yi Xian turned around and was about to leave when he seemed to have thought of something. He suddenly glanced around and in the next moment, he vanished. Next to him, the Emperor Hound shook its head. It naturally knew what Yi Xian was going to do: plunder. Yi Xian frantically plundered the treasures in the Ghost Gate. As long as he saw something good, he would put it away. Soon, all the treasures in the Ghost Gate were swept away by him. Just as Yi Xian was about to leave, Soul's voice suddenly sounded, "Young master, take those coffins away." Coffins? Yi Xian was stunned, then looked up at the mountain wall in the distance. There were still 6 coffins floating on the mountain wall. Without hesitation, Yi Xian flew directly to the 6 coffins. He didn't open them, but with a wave of his right hand he put them away. After putting away the coffins, Yi Xian landed next to the Emperor Hound and said in a deep voice, "Let's go." The Emperor Hound frowned slightly. "Backlash?" Yi Xian nodded. After using the soul-suppressing sword in the God set, his body had already started to backlash. Just now the consumption was too great. The Emperor Hound said in a low voice, "Let's recover first before we leave?" Yi Xian shook his head. "We can't stay here for long." He hadn't forgotten that the sect master of the Ghost Gate still hadn't shown himself. If the sect master rushed back, then things would become even more troublesome. The Emperor Hound nodded slightly. "Let's go." It didn't take long for Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound to appear outside. As soon as Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound emerged, countless eyes in the surroundings instantly turned to look at Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound. Yi Xian had come out. The surroundings were very quiet. Yi Xian turned to glance at the Ghost Gate, and then he hesitated for a moment before he said, "Soul, is there a way to take this thing away?" Only now did he realize that the place they just entered was actually within the Ghost Gate. This thing was a space of its own and it wasn't simple at all. So he thought of taking it away. Soul fell silent for a moment and then she said, "A divine object like this should have a spirit of its own. Young master can try to trick it and see if you can trick it away." Yi Xian's face darkened. "Trick? What are you talking about? You make it sound like I always trick people." In the end, Yi Xian chose to give it a try. He walked over to the Ghost Gate and said, "You have no future if you stay here. Why don't you follow me?" There was no response at all. Yi Xian thought about it for a moment, and then an illusory Xiaota appeared between his brows. As soon as the illusory Xiaota appeared, the world changed, and the expressions of all the experts in the surroundings changed drastically as they retreated explosively. Below, Yi Xian put away the world prison pagoda and turned to leave. At this moment, the Ghoul Gate behind him suddenly trembled. In the next moment, the Ghoul Gate turned into a black light and flew in front of him. Yi Xian sighed softly in his heart. This fellow isn't willing to follow me, but it's willing to follow the pagoda. No matter what, it's a good thing. After he put the Ghost Gate away, Yi Xian glanced at the surroundings and was about to speak. However, the Imperial Hound suddenly turned its head and looked towards the horizon, and then its expression changed. "Someone is tearing through space and rushing over here. They'll arrive here in 10 breaths of time at most." Yi Xian asked, "Can you defeat them?" The Imperial Hound fell silent. Seeing that, Yi Xian said directly, "Retreat." As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. The Imperial Hound vanished as well. All of them were puzzled. He left just like that? Suddenly the space here trembled, and it didn't take long for an expanse of space to explode apart. A middle-aged man walked out from within it, and then the space around him instantly started to warp. Someone exclaimed in the shadows, "It's the Ghost Gate's master, Li Zhangfeng." All of them were astounded. Li Zhangfeng arrived before the Ghost Gate, but it was completely empty now. He remained silent for a short while before he spoke softly, "I just went out for a while." As he spoke, he glanced at the surroundings. "Can anyone tell me what exactly happened here?" After a moment of silence, an old man suddenly appeared before the Ghost Gate's master. A short while later, Li Zhangfeng spoke softly, "Is it Yi Xian?" As he spoke, he looked at the old man. "Thank you." The old man hurriedly bowed. "You're too kind." Li Zhangfeng turned and looked nearby. "You must be Mr. Mu Zhou of the 100 Shao Pavilion, right?" Mu Zhou hurriedly appeared and slightly bowed. "That's me." Li Zhangfeng spoke softly, "Please help me investigate this person's whereabouts, mister." Mu Zhou hesitated slightly. "Is there a problem?" Li Zhangfeng asked. Mu Zhou smiled bitterly. "Senior Li, this isn't something that I can make the decision on. Please go find the pavilion master." Of course he did not have the nerve to investigate Yi Xian. That guy was like a lunatic at the moment. Moreover, it was obvious that Yi Xian's background was not simple. Once he investigated him, it was highly possible that the Baishao Pavilion would be in big trouble. As for the person in front of him, he didn't dare to refuse. Although Li Zhangfeng looked very friendly, he didn't forget that this was the Ghost Sect master, one of the strongest in the Heaven region. He was in existence on the same level as the pavilion master of the 100 Shao Pavilion. Hearing Mu Zhou's words, Li Zhangfeng nodded slightly and said softly, "I understand. It seems that this Yi Xian's background is not simple." As his voice faded, he had already disappeared. Seeing this, Mu Zhou let out a sigh of relief. After a moment of silence, he also turned and left. Very quickly, what happened at the Ghost Sect quickly spread throughout Weiyang City. Yi Xian's name also spread. On an isolated island in a small pavilion, Li Zhangfeng picked up the spirit tea on the stone table and took a sip. After a moment, he smiled slightly, "Good tea." As he spoke, he looked in front of him. In front of him sat a woman. She looked very young, only 15 or 16 years old. This person was the pavilion master of the 100 Shao Pavilion, Bailey Xian. Bailey Xian smiled slightly. "Sect Master Li, are you here for that Yi Xian?" Li Zhangfeng nodded, "Yes." Bailey Xian smiled. She took out a scroll and placed it in front of Li Zhangfeng. "This is all the information about him." Li Zhangfeng chuckled. "There's no need to read it. I just want to know where he is." Bailey Xian smiled. "Sect Master Li, it's better if you read it." Li Zhangfeng was silent for a moment, then he opened the scroll. After a moment he put it away and fell silent. Bailey Xian picked up the spirit tea and took a sip. Then she said softly, "This person came from a small world. Along the way he encountered many troubles. During this time his opponents mysteriously disappeared a few times. The Azure Firmament World's Realm Protection Alliance was like that, and so was the Dugu family and the Gu family. With his personal strength, it is impossible for him to destroy these two families, even if he has that unknown demon beast with him." Li Zhangfeng said, "Even the pavilion master can't find out where that demon beast came from?" Bailey Xian said softly, "There are only two possibilities for the pavilion master to be unable to find out where he came from. One, he is not a demon beast of this era. Two, he is not a demon beast of the never-ending galaxy." Then she looked at Li Zhangfeng, the corners of her mouth lifting slightly. "Sect Master Li, do you understand what I mean?" Li Zhangfeng smiled. "Why not? You want to tell me that his background is becoming more and more mysterious, or that the force behind him is more and more mysterious, right?" Bailey Xian smiled. "It's not just that. Everyone knows that he has that ultimate treasure, but the one in the sacred ground and the one in the palace haven't done anything. This is getting more and more complicated." Li Zhangfeng was silent for a moment, then said softly, "What about the other one?" Bailey Xian put down the teacup. "As far as I know, the other one has already come into contact with this Yi Xian. But it was just a brief contact, nothing more." Then she looked at Li Zhangfeng. "My personal suggestion is that Pavilion Master Li wait and see." Li Zhangfeng suddenly asked, "His mother is in the Pavilion Master Li?" Bailey Xian glanced at Li Zhangfeng. "What, Sect Master Li wants to use her to threaten Yi Xian?" Li Zhangfeng laughed. "Pavilion Master, you underestimate me. Matters between men should naturally be resolved by men themselves." Then he stood up. "If it was before, I would definitely choose to wait and see. But now I can't. Goodbye. Then he turned and left. Chapter 434. Unending Palace. In the garden deep within Weiyang Palace, a little girl was lying on a white reclining chair. Beside her was an exquisite chair. On the chair was a white teacup. Insects chirped and the fragrance of flowers filled the air. At this moment, a black shadow appeared near the girl. The black shadow bowed to the girl. Palace Lord. The ghoul sect only has Li Zhangfeng left. After a moment of silence, the girl said softly, the ghoul sect underestimated him. The black shadow nodded. Although Yi Xian is only at the transformation state, his strength is enough to kill a sage state. Of course, it has a lot to do with his relic equipment, especially those two swords of his. Anyone who touches them will die. When he spoke up to here, he paused for a moment before he continued, as for that demonic beast, I've already gone to the demon clan to ask about it. That demonic beast isn't an expert of the demon clan, so it should have come from the outside. The girl suddenly said, Li Zhangfeng has been to the Great Wall of Sky Burial? The black shadow said, yes, but we don't know his purpose for now. When he spoke up to this point, he hesitated for a moment and said, Palace Master, could he be colluding with the Moke clan? The girl said, he wouldn't dare. The black shadow said in a deep voice, Leader, the whole Weiyang city has been in turmoil since Yi Xian came here. If things go on like this, it may cause a lot of chaos. Should we do something to deter them? The girl shook her head, we can't stop him. Unless he comes to Unending Palace. But if we do that, he'll die even faster. The black shadow frowned, why? The woman said indifferently, if he comes to the Endless Palace, everyone will think that the Endless Palace wants that treasure. At that time, the enemies of the Endless Palace will be his enemies. In order to prevent that treasure from falling into the Endless Palace's hands, those people will kill him at all costs. The black shadow said, why should we be afraid? The girl said softly, the current situation is not suitable for internal strife. If there is, it's exactly what the Moke clan wants. The black shadow said, are we just going to let it go on like this? That Yi Xian dares to do anything. If this continues, there will be chaos. After a moment of silence, the woman softly said, humans are greedy. If he doesn't die, this matter will not end. The shadow asked, kill him? The woman suddenly opened her eyes and looked at the black figure. The latter's expression changed and he quickly knelt down on one knee. The woman said coldly, just keep an eye on him. Don't worry about anything else. The shadow bowed respectfully, this subordinate understands. With that, he quietly retreated. After the black shadow retreated, the woman slowly closed her eyes. In her mind, the scenes from back then in the Azure world appeared. In the northernmost part of the heaven domain there was a mountain. The mountain was 9,900 zhang tall and pierced through the clouds. This mountain was called the Sacred Mountain. The famous Holy Land was located on this mountain. The summit of the sacred mountain was shrouded in clouds and mist, making it look like a fairyland. Not too far away was a palace. This palace did not look very grand and was actually quite old. On the left and right side of the palace stood two statues holding long swords. Behind the palace was an arena. On the arena, a man and a woman were fighting fiercely. Both of them were making a lot of noise, but they controlled it very well. The aftershocks did not spread outside the arena. Not far away from the arena stood an old man. The old man wore a white robe and had a goatee. Just at this moment, the man in the arena was suddenly sent flying out of the arena. After the man fell to the ground, he grumbled, Sister, you really want to kill me? In the arena, the woman glanced coldly at the man. If you go to the Great Burial Wall like this, you won't survive a day. This chapter is not finished, please continue. The man curled his lips, I'm not going. The woman suddenly appeared in front of the man. The next moment she kicked the man's chest. Bang! The man flew out again. A few hundred zhang away the man wailed, Sister, are you trying to kill your brother? The woman said coldly, if you don't even dare to go to the Great Burial Wall, don't tell others that you're my brother. The man said angrily, it's not that I don't dare to go. I just don't want to go. The woman named Chu Nanxing said lightly, if you don't dare to go, then you don't dare to go. So many excuses. The man still wanted to say something, but Chu Nanxing turned and walked to the old man not far away. She bowed slightly, you sure? The old man nodded slightly, Nanxing, with your current strength, you can even kill a Saint Realm Master. Chu Nanxing said lightly, I could already kill him half a year ago. The old man frowned, Nanxing, I've always told you confidence is fine, but don't be arrogant. Chu Nanxing nodded slightly, Nanxing will remember. Saying so, she seemed to think of something and asked, "You sure? I heard that a person named Yi Xian appeared in the heaven domain?" The old man nodded, "A guy from the outside. His strength is not bad and his identity is quite mysterious." Saying so, he seemed to think of something and said seriously, "Nanxing, don't provoke this person, understand?" Chu Nanxing frowned, "You sure is afraid that I can't beat him?" The old man shook his head, "You won't be worse than him. It's just that this person has a great treasure, and his identity is extremely sensitive. Holy Lord's intention is to temporarily wait and see." Chu Nanxing said solemnly, "Understood." Saying so, she turned to look at the man not far away, "Are we going to the Great Burial Heaven Wall?" The man hesitated. Chu Nanxing smiled coldly, "You're such a coward that even I, as your sister, look down on you." Saying so, she turned and left. Behind her, the man said angrily, "Chu Nanxing, don't look down on people. Let's go." After saying that, he hurriedly followed after them. After the two siblings left, Yushe turned and looked not far away. "Holy Lord, are you really not going to touch that Yi Xian?" After a moment, a voice suddenly sounded, "Don't." Yushe nodded slightly, "Understood." Saying so, he quietly retreated. Outside the Holy Land in the sky. "Sister, are you going to find that Yi Xian?" "Why did you hit me? Did I say something wrong?" "You know too much." After leaving the Devil's Gate, Yi Xian directly used the Chaos Chi to conceal his aura and then found a cave in the mountain range to hide. What he needed now was to heal his injuries. Previously he had consumed too much energy and now he was starting to suffer from the backlash. That feeling was not good. Inside the cave, the Emperor Dog said, "Aren't you worried about her?" This her, naturally referred to Dugu Xian. Yi Xian said, "As long as I'm alive, the 100-Nose Pavilion will protect her." Saying so, he slightly paused, "You go." The Emperor Dog said in a deep voice, "You're in a bad situation now." Yi Xian smiled, "With the Chaos Chi, ordinary people can't find me." The Emperor Dog still wanted to say something, but Yi Xian said softly, "She needs more protection than I do." The Emperor Dog nodded slightly, and then it directly disappeared. Inside the cave, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground, crazily devouring purple origin crystals. He now discovered that since he cultivated in adversity, his physical body, soul, and mental strength were much stronger than before. Therefore, the backlash wasn't as serious as before. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. If he had used the soul-suppressing sword in the God set like this before, he would probably be unconscious by now. But now he only felt uncomfortable all over, that was all. Moreover, his strength was many times stronger than before. Obviously, adversity cultivation was completely possible. Walking his own path. About an hour later, Yi Xian stood up. At this moment, his injuries were almost completely healed. After his injuries were healed, Yi Xian hurriedly asked, "Little Soul, has she woken up?" After a moment of silence, Little Soul said, "Not yet, young master will have to wait." Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Okay, take your time." Little Soul said, "Don't worry, young master, I'm confident that nothing will happen." Hearing this, Yi Xian inwardly relaxed. Good. Saying so, he sat cross-legged again and began to sort out the treasures he had obtained in the Ghost Gate. He had obtained more than 30 million purple source crystals in the Ghost Gate. Including the previous ones, he now had more than 60 million purple source crystals. And there were only 3 Saint-grade treasures, but including the previous ones he now had a total of 9 Saint-grade treasures that he could sell. Besides that, there were also some miscellaneous items, but he didn't want any of them. By swords. Yi Xian quietly left the cave and headed to Weiyang City. He needed a lot of Saint-grade swords now. His core was still devouring swords. Cultivation, not only needed to comprehend the state of mind, but also needed to absorb a huge amount of spiritual qi. Just like ordinary people, not only did they need to constantly learn to improve their thinking and knowledge, but they also needed to eat to maintain their lives. The same was true for cultivation, not a single one could be missing. Soon Yi Xian quietly sneaked into Weiyang City. After asking around, he came to a chamber of commerce. This chamber of commerce was called Taiyuan Chamber of Commerce, and in Tianyu City, it was second only to the Million Treasures Chamber of Commerce. Yi Xian wore a black robe and his whole body was covered in black. After he walked into the Chamber of Commerce, a woman hurriedly came to greet him. "Mister, what do you need?" Yi Xian said, "Do you want to go somewhere else?" The woman was stunned and then she hurriedly said, "Okay." As she spoke, she brought Yi Xian to a private room. Yi Xian said, "I need swords." The woman smiled and said, May I know what grade of swords you need? Yi Xian said, Saint grade 5. The woman was stunned. Yi Xian said, You don't have any? The woman came to her senses and she hurriedly said, Yes, please wait a moment. After saying that, she turned and left. After a while, a beautiful woman walked in. The beautiful woman looked to be in her 30s and she still retained her charm. The beautiful woman walked up to Yi Xian and said with a smile, You want 5 Saint grade swords? Yi Xian nodded. The beautiful woman's smile became even brighter. I do, but the price? Yi Xian pointed a finger and a storage ring landed in front of the beautiful woman. The beautiful woman glanced at it, and her expression instantly changed. She hurriedly said, Esteemed guest, do you want it now or? Yi Xian said, As soon as possible. The beautiful woman said, Please wait a moment, I'll go prepare it right away. After saying that, she turned and left. After a while, a beautiful woman came in with a stack of spirit fruits. After she placed the spirit fruits in front of Yi Xian, she bowed slightly and said shyly, Esteemed guest, do you need special service? Special service? Yi Xian was stunned. What special service? P.S. Where can I go to get special service? I'm asking on behalf of the readers. Really? End of this chapter. Chapter 435. The woman was slightly stunned when she heard Yi Xian's words. In the next moment she walked over to Yi Xian and took off her clothes. Seeing this, Yi Xian instantly understood what special service was. Yi Xian tapped with his finger and a spatial ring landed in front of the woman. The woman glanced at the spatial ring. There were over 300 violet origin crystals in it. The woman was puzzled. This is? Yi Xian said, Leave. I don't need special service. The woman hesitated for a moment before she put the spatial ring away. Sorry for disturbing you. With that, she turned around and left the room. Yi Xian sat silently as he glanced at the surroundings. There were some obscure auras in the surroundings. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. I didn't enter a scam, did I? Not long after, the beautiful woman from before walked in and smiled. Your Excellency, we currently have 3 Saint rank swords and each one is priced at 12 million violet origin crystals. Your Excellency. Yi Xian frowned slightly. 12 million? The beautiful woman nodded. Yes, Saint rank swords are extremely rare, so the price is slightly higher. Yi Xian said, 10 million per sword. The beautiful woman was in a difficult position. Your Excellency, I'm afraid that's not possible. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Then I'll be taking my leave. With that he stood up and left. Because when he was at the Myriad Treasures chamber, the price they offered was 10 million per Saint rank sword. But now the chamber actually wanted 12 million. They were obviously trying to blackmail him. Wait. Right at this moment, the beautiful woman suddenly spoke. Yi Xian stopped. The beautiful woman walked over to Yi Xian and smiled. Esteemed guest, don't be anxious. The price can be discussed. Yi Xian nodded. I don't want to waste time. If your chamber can sell it to me for 10 million, I'll take it. If not, I can only go to the Myriad Treasures chamber. The beautiful woman glanced at Yi Xian and no one knew what she was thinking. Yi Xian laughed and said, Are you thinking of eating me directly? The beautiful woman narrowed her eyes and clenched her fists tightly within her sleeves. Yi Xian smiled and said, You can try really? The beautiful woman remained silent for a moment. Right at this moment, her right ear suddenly trembled slightly, and in the next moment she hurriedly smiled and said, What are you talking about? Our Taiyuan Trading Company has never done such evil things. If your Excellency says 10 million per handle, then 10 million it is. With that said, she waved her right hand and a long box appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian opened the box and saw 3 swords inside. All of them were at the saint level. Yi Xian nodded and then he flicked his finger. A spatial ring containing 30 million violet origin crystals flew over to the beautiful woman. The beautiful woman glanced at the storage ring before putting it away with a smile. If you're not in a hurry, you can wait for 4 hours and we'll transfer the goods right away. Yi Xian nodded. Sure. I'll come back in 4 hours. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. The beautiful woman spoke in a low voice once she saw Yi Xian leave. You didn't find out his background? A voice resounded from the shadows. No. The beautiful woman frowned. Meanwhile, the voice resounded once more. He isn't simple at all. It's best not to act against him. The beautiful woman fell silent for a short while before she said, Besides those 3 Saint rank swords, he has at least 20 million violet origin crystals. It's worth the risk. The voice continued, If we encounter a formidable opponent. The beautiful woman laughed coldly. Even the joint forces of two saints wouldn't be able to kill him? The voice fell silent for a short while before it said, "All right, then we'll give it a try." The beautiful woman said, "All right, both of you hide in the shadows for now. Once he arrives I'll..." Right at this moment, the beautiful woman's voice stopped abruptly. Her eyes opened wide and were filled with terror because her throat had been split open and blood was spraying out like a fountain. Meanwhile, a black-clothed figure suddenly appeared in front of the beautiful woman, and she gazed at him with terror. "Save." The black-clothed figure glanced at her and shook his head. "Your soul is ethereal. It's hopeless." Just like that, the beautiful woman collapsed to the ground. Even at the moment of her death, her eyes were filled with despair and unwillingness. She hadn't imagined that she would be killed without making a single sound. Who was it? At the moment of her death, she thought of that black-robed figure from before. The black-clothed figure glanced at the surroundings and became extremely vigilant. "It was my Taiyuan merchant group's fault. Please forgive me." There was no movement in the surroundings, so the black-clothed figure spoke in a low voice. "Please show yourself." There was still no movement. The black-clothed figure sighed softly. He knew that the black-clothed figure might have left. As if he'd thought of something, he gazed at the beautiful woman's hand. At this moment, the spatial ring in her hand was gone. She'd lost both her wealth and swords. The black-clothed figure suddenly clenched his right fist, and the table before him instantly transformed into powder. At a corner of the street outside Taiyuan Merchant Group, Yi Xian sat on the ground and gazed at the spatial ring in his hand while the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. He'd earned 3 saint-level swords for free. Previously, he'd sensed that the beautiful woman had ill intentions, so he'd chosen to leave and use the chaos to conceal himself before returning to the room. As he'd expected, the other party really wanted to take advantage of him. Since the other party was heartless, he naturally had to be unjust. Because he knew that if he was weak, the other party would devour him until not even his bones were left. This world was cruel. A moment later he stood up and left. This time he directly left Weiyang City. He didn't choose to look for the Emperor Hound or Dugu Xian. His top priority now was to improve his strength. And Dugu Xian had the Emperor Hound to secretly protect her, so there was no problem with her safety. In the vast mountain range, Yi Xian found a quiet cave. This cave was hidden deep within the mountains. Coupled with his concealment of his aura, it was impossible for others to find him. Inside the cave, Yi Xian entered the prison pagoda. If he was inside the cave, a bit of his aura might cause quite a commotion. After all, there were many people who wanted to cause trouble for him now. Inside the prison pagoda, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. He waved his right hand and 3 saint-level swords appeared in front of him. He was currently using the Celestial Spirit Sword as his Dantian, but the Celestial Spirit Sword was clearly not enough. Therefore he decided to use the Soul-Suppressing Sword as his Dantian. Yi Xian waved his right hand and the Soul-Suppressing Sword appeared in front of him. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Little Soul, are you willing to become my Dantian?" Even though he was Little Soul's master in name, he knew that Little Soul was actually a very opinionated person. This matter had to be discussed with her. Little Soul was silent for a moment and then said, "There won't be any restrictions, right?" Yi Xian shook his head, "There won't be any restrictions." Little Soul said, "Then no problem." Yi Xian smiled, "You have to cooperate with me." If Little Soul didn't cooperate with him, he wouldn't dare to let Little Soul become his Dantian because Little Soul's level was too high and it was too easy for something to happen. Little Soul said, "Yes, young master." Yi Xian nodded, then picked up the soul-suppressing sword and stabbed it into his abdomen. Soon Yi Xian's body trembled. Oh no! Yi Xian's expression changed because he found that the soul-suppressing sword's level was too high, and his body couldn't bear it. Yi Xian hurriedly used the invincible golden body. After using the invincible golden body, his body gradually calmed down. Just like that, time passed bit by bit. A day later, inside the cave, a powerful aura suddenly swept out from his body. Qi-controlling realm. At this moment, he directly broke through from the Qi-change realm to the Qi-controlling realm. Yi Xian took a deep breath. He felt his body and found that there was a subtle change in him from before. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth curled up slightly as if he thought of something. He hurriedly asked, "Little Soul, do you feel any discomfort?" Little Soul was silent for a moment, then said, "No, it's just that there's a subtle connection with young master, and I can even feel the changes in young master's emotions." Yi Xian smiled and said, "You don't mind, do you?" Little Soul said, "I don't mind, young master becoming stronger is also very beneficial to me." Yi Xian nodded, "That's good." As he spoke, he looked at the saint rank sword in front of him. Without hesitation, he directly picked up the sword and stabbed it into his abdomen. Soon, a pure energy spread out from his body like a tide. Half of this energy was absorbed by his body, and the other half was absorbed by the soul-suppressing sword. At this time, Little Red said with some excitement, "Young master, can I also absorb the sword that you devoured?" Yi Xian nodded, "Yes." Little Soul said, "This is a good thing. In this way young master and I can both improve together." Yi Xian said, "Does this sword improve you a lot?" Little Soul said, "As far as I'm concerned, it's very much. However, once I recover to my peak, these swords won't be so useful to me anymore." Yi Xian said with a smile, "It's good that it's of great use for now." Little Soul said, "Young master, you can find more swords to devour." Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. "Looks like this Little Soul has tasted the sweetness. Right, devouring these saint rank swords isn't just very beneficial to me, it should be very beneficial to Little Soul as well. Otherwise Little Soul wouldn't be so excited." Yi Xian continued to digest the energy within his body. The next day Yi Xian picked up another saint rank sword and stabbed it into his abdomen before madly absorbing it. As this energy was absorbed by his body started to slowly change. At the same time, his aura was gradually becoming stronger, and he faintly showed signs of breaking through. Perceiving this scene, Yi Xian's expression changed, and he quickly suppressed the aura within his body. He didn't want to break through yet because after reaching the qi-controlling realm, he hadn't properly absorbed it yet. It could be said that his state of mind hadn't reached its peak yet. If he broke through now, although it wouldn't be a big problem, it wouldn't be perfect. He didn't want any flaws in his adversity cultivation. Under Yi Xian's crazy suppression, his aura gradually calmed down, but after a while, it seemed to rebound again. Yi Xian hurriedly said, "Little Soul, help me suppress it." Little Soul said, "Okay." As her voice fell, a powerful soul power suddenly enveloped Yi Xian. With the help of this soul power, Yi Xian's aura suddenly calmed down. A moment later, Yi Xian directly collapsed to the ground. He wiped the sweat from his forehead and smiled bitterly, "Others want to break through, but I'm frantically suppressing my realm." At this moment Xiaoling suddenly walked over. She said in a panic, The door went to the 5th floor." Yi Xian was a bit confused. "What door?" After saying that, he suddenly sat up. "The ghost door?" As he said that, he looked up and at this moment, boom! A loud noise suddenly sounded from the 5th floor. The entire prison pagoda shook violently. Yi Xian. Chapter 436. As the prison pagoda shook violently, a door soon appeared in front of Yi Xian and Xiaolinger. Hellgate. When the Hellgate appeared, it immediately hid in a corner, trembling. Yi Xian discovered that its body was covered in cracks. It had been beaten. Yi Xian's expression darkened. Without a doubt, the 5th floor had awakened. Xiaolinger raised her head to look, then subconsciously approached Yi Xian, her small hand tightly grasping Yi Xian's sleeve. Yi Xian looked up. "Senior?" No response. Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Senior, can we talk?" Still no response. Yi Xian sighed. Needless to say, this was another difficult person to talk to. But fortunately the other party had not come out yet. Obviously, either the seal had not been completely broken, or the other party had not recovered his strength. Of course, no matter what, he had to improve his strength as soon as possible. Yi Xian gently rubbed Xiaolinger's head, smiling, "Don't be afraid." Xiaolinger rubbed her head against Yi Xian's arm. "Scared? So scared." Yi Xian said with a smile, "I'm here." Xiaolinger looked up at Yi Xian, "But you can't beat him." Yi Xian's face darkened. After comforting Xiaolinger, Yi Xian walked to the Hellgate. At this moment, the Hellgate was still trembling. Obviously, it must have suffered some inhumane treatment. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed again. Looking at it this way, the 5th floor was not easy to deal with. There were so many enemies outside and there were also some terrifying fellows inside. Life was not easy. Yi Xian said, "Xiaoling, can you help it repair?" Xiaoling said, "It needs soul power, I can help it heal." Yi Xian nodded, "Then I'll have to trouble you." With that, he left the World Prison Pagoda. He didn't want to worry about the 5th floor of the tower for the time being. Because he couldn't do anything about it and he couldn't stop the other party. Let nature take its course. Yi Xian walked out of the cave and glanced around. He put his right hand together and gently moved his fingers. Soon an energy sword quietly condensed. Previously, when he was at the Qi transformation realm, he could also condense Qi swords. However, compared to now, the density of his Qi swords was several times worse. Moreover, he could feel that there was still a lot of room for improvement in this condensed energy sword. Limit. At this moment he suddenly understood a principle. Even if it was a small matter, as long as it was done to the extreme, it would be an amazing thing. Yi Xian pointed his finger lightly, and the chi sword suddenly flew out. In the blink of an eye, a leaf that was 1,000 feet away quietly fell. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. He put his fingers together and gently lifted them. In an instant, 10 energy swords appeared around him. The next moment, the 10 energy swords suddenly disappeared. 1,000 feet away, 10 leaves fell to the ground silently. Yi Xian suddenly moved his right hand. Soon, 20 energy swords appeared around him. Just like that, Yi Xian slowly increased the number of energy swords. After about an hour, he had increased the number of energy swords to 50. However, at this moment he clearly felt the strain. Moreover, the speed and power of the energy swords had decreased. It could be said that if he added more energy swords, the power of the energy swords would be greatly reduced. Yi Xian didn't choose to increase the number of energy swords. Instead, he continuously used the 50 energy swords, hoping to use them to the extreme. Cultivate. In the following time, Yi Xian began to cultivate like crazy in the mountain range. 3 days later. This chapter is not finished. Please continue. Yi Xian, who was cultivating, suddenly received a message from the emperor dog. Soon he left the mountain range. 2 hours later, Yi Xian arrived at a tea house in Weiyang City. An old man stood in front of the tea house. When he saw this old man, his expression immediately turned serious. He couldn't sense the old man's aura. The old man walked in front of Yi Xian. Young Master Yi, the pavilion master, is on the 3rd floor. Please follow me. Yi Xian nodded slightly and followed the old man to the 3rd floor. On the 3rd floor he saw Dugu Xian, the emperor dog, and a woman in a lotus leaf dress. Dugu Xian walked in front of Yi Xian and said with a trembling voice, "Ling or she?" Yi Xian said, "She's fine." Hearing this, the stone in Dugu Xian's heart was immediately lifted. Yi Xian turned to look at the woman not far away. The woman smiled slightly. "Young Master Yi, please sit." Yi Xian walked in front of the woman and sat down. The woman smiled and said, "Allow me to introduce myself. I'm Bailey Xian, the current pavilion master of the 100 Daybreaks Pavilion." Yi Xian said, "Thank you for coming all this time." Bailey Xian smiled and said, "It's nothing. Young Master Yi is a straightforward person, so I won't beat around the bush. I called young Master Yi here today because I want young Master Yi to take your mother away. Because the news of your mother being in the 100 Daybreaks Pavilion has spread, many people might have designs on her. For her safety, it's best that young Master Yi take her away." Hearing this, Yi Xian understood. To put it simply, the 100 Daybreaks Pavilion didn't want to offend countless forces and experts because of him. This was normal. The 100 Daybreaks Pavilion was not related to him, so they naturally wouldn't become enemies with countless forces for him. Yi Xian nodded. "I've troubled the pavilion during this time. I, Yi Xian, will remember this favor." Saying this, he stood up. "Pavilion Master Xian, farewell." "Please wait." Bailey Xian smiled and said, "Young Master Yi, don't be in such a hurry to leave." Yi Xian asked, "Is there anything else?" Bailey Xian smiled and said, "Let's have a chat." "Of course, if young Master Yi is in a hurry, you can leave now." Yi Xian thought about it and then sat down. "Then let's have a chat." Bailey Xian picked up the teacup and took a sip, then said, "Young Master Yi, do you know about the Weiyang Star Palace and the sacred grounds?" Yi Xian nodded. "I've heard of them." Bailey Xian smiled and said, "You've only heard of them. It seems that young Master Yi doesn't know much about these two forces." Yi Xian said, "What are you trying to say, Pavilion Master Xian?" Bailey Xian smiled slightly. "Young Master Yi should be clear about your current situation. Of course, with the strength of young Master Yi and the demon beast beside you, ordinary forces can't do anything to you. However, what if these forces start to secretly join forces? At that time, what will appear in front of you won't be a few Sage Realm experts, but dozens of Sage Realm experts or even more Sage Realm experts." Yi Xian was silent. Bailey Xian continued, "Besides that, young Master Yi, you still have to face another problem. That is the sacred grounds and the Weiyang Star Palace, as well as some hidden families. These people are in the dark and you are in the light. If you fight with them, you will be at a great disadvantage. Especially now, everyone has a general understanding of your strength. So if they attack, they will definitely be fully prepared." Yi Xian smiled and said, "From what Miss Xian means, you're going to give me a clear path. I, Yi Xian, am willing to hear the details." Bailey Xian looked at Yi Xian. "Go to the Great Wall of Burial Sky." Yi Xian frowned slightly. Great Wall of Burial Sky? Where is that? Bailey Xian glanced at Yi Xian with a meaningful look. At first, she had suspected that Yi Xian was from another galaxy, but now it seemed that Yi Xian was not from the outside world. He was born and raised in the Weiyang Star Sector. Bailey Xian smiled. The Great Wall of Burial Sky is how should I put it? It's a battlefield we're not. This chapter is not over. Please continue. The battlefield between the Central Galaxy and the Moke clan is our only barrier against the Moke clan. Yi Xian asked, enemies? Bailey Xian nodded. Very powerful enemies. Yi Xian suddenly said, you want me to join the Moke clan? The corners of Bailey Xian's eyes twitched. What are you thinking? If you had such thoughts, you would have died 100 times. Yi Xian was speechless. Then why do you want me to go there? Bailey Xian said, to avoid trouble. Yi Xian was puzzled. I can avoid trouble there? Bailey Xian nodded. Because no sage cultivators can appear there. Even the experts of the sage realm can't appear there. If you go there, there won't be any experts above the sage realm targeting you. So, your chances of survival will be greater. Moreover, that place is an excellent place for cultivation. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Miss Xian, are there many people plotting against me? Bailey Xian was silent for a moment, then said, many. I know a lot, but there must be a lot I don't know. If you continue to stay here, you will have to continue killing. The Weiyang Palace will not allow you to continue killing. That person will not allow the Weiyang Star Sector to descend into chaos. So, if you continue to stay, the Weiyang Palace will most likely intervene. If you choose to go to the Great Wall of Burial Sky, your mother can continue to stay here. I promise you that she will be safe. Yi Xian frowned. You want me to go to the Great Wall of Burial Sky, Miss Xian? Bailey Xian smiled. I guess so. Yi Xian was silent. Mother will stay here. Yi Xian was slightly tempted because Dugu Xian could not enter the pagoda. Even though it could hold people, it was even more dangerous inside. It was much more dangerous inside than outside. Especially now that the pagoda's seal had loosened and the 5th level had awakened. He didn't know what would happen in the next moment. So, it would be more dangerous for Dugu Xian to stay in the pagoda than outside. If Yi Ling's situation wasn't special, he wouldn't want Yi Ling to stay in the pagoda. Meanwhile, Bailey Xian said, what do you think? Yi Xian said, I'll think about it. As soon as he finished speaking, he stood up and left. Dugu Xian and the Emperor Hound followed. Yi Xian had only taken a few steps when a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of him. It was the Ghoul Sect Master Li Zhangfeng. Bailey Xian's expression was calm when he saw Li Zhangfeng. Obviously he had expected this. Li Zhangfeng smiled and said, Pavilion Master Xian, I've been waiting for him for a long time. Bailey Xian looked at Yi Xian and said, I can't promise to protect you, but I can promise to protect the people around you. If you agree to go to the Great Wall of Sky, even if you die later, I can promise you that your mother will be safe. She will always be safe. Yi Xian smiled and said, What makes you promise? Bailey Xian smiled and said, If you don't believe me, you can leave at any time. Yi Xian was silent for a moment and then said, Okay, I'll go to the Great Wall of Sky. The corner of Bailey Xian's mouth curled up. Don't worry, your mother is here. No one will dare to cause trouble for her. Yi Xian nodded and then looked at Li Zhangfeng, who was not far away. Li Zhangfeng looked at Yi Xian and smiled and said, I came to find you because I'm bullying you. How about this, take one move from me? If you don't die, we'll write off all our grudges. How about it? Yi Xian thought about it and then pointed at the Emperor Hound not far away and said, Can it take it on my behalf? Bailey Xian was speechless. P.S. There are many old hands among the readers. What special services, what healthcare? How do you know so clearly? I suddenly realized that I'm so naive. End of this chapter. Chapter 437. Bailey Xian shook his head when he heard Yi Xian. Yi Xian's skin is really too thick. Yi Xian might not be able to take a blow from Li Zhangfeng, but the Emperor Dog could definitely take a blow from him. Li Zhangfeng shook his head and smiled when he heard Yi Xian. In that case, all of you can come at me together. The Emperor Hound was about to attack when Yi Xian suddenly said, I'll do it. The Emperor Hound gazed at Yi Xian. You might not be able to. Yi Xian smiled. I'll give it a try. The Emperor Hound hesitated for a moment before it nodded. Yi Xian walked over to Li Zhangfeng. Li Zhangfeng said, Actually, you can attack with it. Yi Xian shook his head. Bring it on. He wasn't confident in his ability to defeat the Emperor Hound even if he attacked with it. Most importantly, if Li Zhangfeng kept the Emperor Hound busy, then it was very likely that the experts in the dark would attack. At that time the situation would be even worse. Li Zhangfeng nodded slightly. He raised his right hand slowly and pressed it lightly towards Yi Xian. It was an extremely calm palm strike. It was terrifyingly calm. When Li Zhangfeng's palm descended towards Yi Xian's expression changed drastically. Because the space where Li Zhangfeng's palm descended seemed to be incinerated and vanished swiftly. At first it was just a black dot, but it didn't take long for it to expand into a huge black hole that was about to swallow Yi Xian. Loss. Meanwhile, Soul's voice resounded abruptly. Young master, it's the energy of the laws. You must be careful. Yi Xian's expression instantly became extremely solemn. He knew that even the God Legion set couldn't resist it. It wasn't just the God Legion set that couldn't resist it, the spatial Dao laws couldn't either. Because the space before him was directly vanishing, and his spatial Dao laws couldn't repair it at all. Or perhaps, his current attainments in the spatial Dao weren't sufficient. So, he couldn't use the spatial Dao laws to repair the space before him. Just as Yi Xian was about to be swallowed by the space, the Emperor Hound was about to attack. However, at that moment Yi Xian suddenly moved a door and hid behind it. And next, the space where Yi Xian was turned into a black hole. However, in less than a breath's time that space went back to normal, and Yi Xian showed up in front of everyone again. The surroundings were extremely quiet. In front of Yi Xian the door was floating quietly. After a while Li Changfeng said softly, "What you're doing is a bit like cheating." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Are you going back on your word?" Yi Zhangfeng can't. Qin King. At this moment Bai Xian, who was not far away, suddenly said, "Sect Master Li, he destroyed the ghoul sect." Li Changfeng stopped. After a moment of silence, he opened his right palm, and a leaf suddenly appeared. The leaf was green at first but it quickly turned yellow and then withered. Li Changfeng smiled and said, "Everything in the world has life and death. For any force, there would be times when it would flourish and times when it would decline. The Hellgate has provoked a tough opponent, and it's their fate to be destroyed." Bai Xian said, "The Ghost Gate is your blood and sweat, yet it was destroyed by him. Are you really willing?" Li Changfeng said, "I tried my best just now. I have a clear conscience." As soon as he finished speaking, the withered leaf in his palm suddenly trembled. Subsequently, the withered leaf actually regained its vitality before everyone's eyes, and it grew back into a tender leaf at a speed that was practically visible to the naked eye. Boom. A powerful aura suddenly swept out from Li Zhangfeng's body. Not far away Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound were forced back by this aura. But Bai Xian and the old man beside her were not affected at all. Bai Xian looked at Li Changfeng and smiled. Congratulations to Sect Leader Li for breaking through to the Sage Realm. He had reached the Blessed Realm. In that hall, there will be an additional chair for Sect Master Li. Li Zhangfeng looked at the leaf in his palm for a long time. In the end he shook his head and smiled. "So, what imprisoned me for so many years was a thought of mine." Bai Xian said, "If Sect Master Li can't get over it and can't think clearly, then you will fall into a trap. Once you do, breaking through to the Sage Realm will be far away." Li Zhangfeng turned around and bowed slightly to Bai Xian. "Thank you, Pavilion Master Xian." Bai Xian accepted the bow calmly. Li Zhangfeng looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "Why don't you take another one of my moves?" "Yi Xian?" Li Zhangfeng laughed and turned around to leave. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. "You can break through like this?" Bai Xian looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "You think it's very simple? Do you know how long he has been stuck at the peak of the Sage Realm? Dozens of years." Then she shook her head and smiled. "Many times the biggest obstacle and biggest enemy on our way forward is ourselves." Yi Xian nodded slightly. He deeply agreed with what Bai Xian said. Many times people's biggest enemy is themselves. At this time Bai Xian suddenly said, "There's no time to lose. You should go to Burial Sky Great Wall now." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Miss Xian, what if I don't go?" Bai Xian said softly, "Do you have a bigger trump card? If you do, show it and let those in the dark stop." Yi Xian was silent. Bai Xian walked in front of Yi Xian and looked at Yi Xian. "It's not me who wants you to go to Burial Sky Great Wall, but someone else. And that person wants you to go to Burial Sky Great Wall to protect you." Yi Xian looked at Bai Xian. "Who?" Bai Xian said, "You'll know in the future." After a moment of silence Yi Xian said, "I'll go." Bai Xian nodded slightly. "Burial Sky Great Wall is not a good place. Don't let your guard down when you go there. Otherwise you will die a horrible death." Then she turned to Dugu Xian. "I know you want to go with him, but you should know your own strength. If you follow him, you will only be a burden. Du Guxian said softly, I understand. As she spoke, she walked in front of Yi Xian. Looking at Yi Xian, her eyes were filled with tenderness. Mother is waiting for you here. Yi Xian nodded. When I return, no one in the never-ending starfield will dare to harm the three of us. Du Guxian froze when she heard this. The next moment, tears flowed down her face and she said in a trembling voice, You're willing to acknowledge me? Yi Xian said softly, Mother, I've never blamed you. Du Guxian was stunned when she heard this. The next moment she hugged Yi Xian, tears gushing out of her eyes like spring water. Yi Xian also felt his body lighten up when he had uttered those two words, as if something had disappeared. He had never blamed the woman in front of him. He was a person who could distinguish between gratitude and grudges. Du Guxian had left to protect him and his sister, so how could he blame her? This time, his sister's accident made him understand that he only had 2 family members left in this world. If he continued to act in a fit of pique, it would only make Du Guxian sad. When he thought of the word, act in a fit of pique, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He had to admit that he had been acting in a fit of pique. He did not know why he would behave so childishly. Perhaps everyone behaved like a child in front of their mother. A moment later, Du Guxian let go of Yi Xian and gently rubbed Yi Xian's head. Be careful when you go to Buried Sky City, okay? Yi Xian nodded. I will be careful. Du Guxian smiled and retreated to the side. Yi Xian said softly, Wait for me to come back. With that, he turned and left with the Emperor Dog. After Yi Xian and the Emperor Dog left, Bai Shaoxian looked at Du Guxian. Miss Xian, go with Elderly. He will take care of you. Behind Bai Shaoxian, the old man walked up to Du Guxian. Please follow the old man. Du Guxian nodded. Thank you. After Du Guxian and Elderly left, a woman suddenly appeared in front of Bai Shaoxian. Bai Shaoxian looked straight at the woman. You're helping him. The woman said calmly, Is there a problem? Bai Shaoxian smiled. No problem. I'm just curious why the Lord of the Never-Ending Starfield would stand up for a man from the lower realm. The Lord of the Never-Ending Starfield. The woman in front of her was the Palace Lord of Never-Ending Palace, Wei Yang Tian. Wei Yang Tian said softly, As far as I know, the Moke clan has already sent someone here. Their target should be him. Bai Shaoxian frowned. The Moke clan is also eyeing that treasure. Wei Yang Tian nodded. Not just them, but some of the random factions outside are already coveting that treasure. If he doesn't go to Buried Sky Great Wall, he might die silently somewhere one day. Bai Shaoxian said solemnly, It's also dangerous for him to go to Buried Sky Great Wall. Wei Yang Tian said softly, At least those above the Sage Realm cannot go there. If he goes there, he can buy himself more time. Bai Shaoxian looked at Wei Yang Tian. You know him? Wei Yang Tian was silent. Bai Shaoxian smiled. All right. I won't ask any more. However, you should understand that this person has a treasure. That means his troubles will never end. Wei Yang Tian said softly, That item brings him fortune, but it also brings him disaster. Whether it's fortune or disaster, he has to bear it. Then she stood up. Spread the word that his mother, Du Guxian, has been protected by Wei Yang Palace. Tell those who have designs on Du Guxian to stay away from me, be they human or ghost. After saying that, she disappeared. Bai Shaoxian shook her head and smiled. Her temper is still as explosive as ever. Then she disappeared as well. Yi Xian returned to Never-Ending City. On the way, the Emperor Hound asked, Someone is helping you. Yi Xian said solemnly, I don't know. As far as he could remember, this was his first time in the Heaven region. He didn't know anyone in the Heaven region. Who was helping him? Yi Xian couldn't figure it out. The Emperor Hound said solemnly, You're still a little weak. Take the Ghoul Sect Master from before. He was only a saint. However, this saint is different from ordinary saints. If you encounter a saint in the future, you must not be careless. Yi Xian nodded. This Li Zhangfeng could be said to be the strongest saint he had met so far. Reality proved that he still couldn't beat a saint with no background. Where are you going now? The Emperor Hound asked. Yi Xian said softly, To the Million Treasures Chamber of Commerce. The Emperor Hound was stunned. To rob again? Yi Xian's face darkened. What are you talking about? Am I that kind of person? The Emperor Hound looked at Yi Xian in shock. Aren't you that kind of person? Yi Xian. Chapter 438. It didn't take long for Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound to arrive at the trading center. As soon as they arrived at the Myriad Treasures Chamber of Commerce, an old man appeared before them. Yi Xian knew this person. It was the old man who'd fought him and the Emperor Hound that day, and he was the president of the trading center. The old man glanced at Yi Xian. May I know what young Master Yi is doing here? How could the trading center not know that Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound were in your sect? So, when Yi Xian arrived at the trading center, the old man showed himself. Yi Xian smiled. Senior, I'm here to buy something. The old man stared at Yi Xian. Are you sure you're not here to steal something? The Emperor Hound roared with laughter. Yi Xian spoke seriously. Senior, you might have misunderstood me. I, Yi Xian, am absolutely not that kind of person. The old man spoke indifferently. Yi Xian, my trading center doesn't have anything to sell to you. Yi Xian smiled. Then I'll sell something. As he spoke, he waved his right hand, and 11 Saint-rank treasures appeared before the old man. The old man's eyelids twitched when he saw these treasures, and then he glanced at Yi Xian. Needless to say, Yi Xian had definitely obtained these treasures by killing others. The old man fell silent for a moment before he said, Come in and talk. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Yi Xian brought the Emperor Hound with him and followed him. Within the room, the old man glanced at Yi Xian. Do you have immortal artifacts? Yi Xian said, Yes. The old man was about to say something when Yi Xian shook his head. But I'm not selling them. Immortal artifacts. His God Legion set and Earth God Seal, as well as his Een spiritual energy sword, were all immortal items. Both of them were very useful to him. The old man pondered for a moment before he said, If you have something you don't need in the future and want to sell, you can come to my trading center. Yi Xian smiled and said, Is there a discount? The old man glanced at Yi Xian. With a flick of his finger, a purple card landed in front of Yi Xian. This is a purple card. If you sell something in my Million Treasures Chamber of Commerce, you'll be charged 5% less as a processing fee. If you buy something from my Million Treasures Chamber of Commerce, you'll also enjoy a 20% discount. Yi Xian put away the purple card. How much can these 10 Saint-grade treasures sell for? The old man said in a low voice, If you're not in a hurry, then we can hold an auction for you. During the auction, these 10 treasures can be sold for even more. If you're in a hurry, my Myriad Treasures Chamber of Commerce can also buy your treasures at market price. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, Can I exchange these 10 treasures for swords? Sword? The old man looked at Yi Xian. You want to exchange all of them for Saint-grade swords? Yi Xian nodded. The old man said in a low voice, Swords are much more precious than Saint-grade treasures. According to my estimation, your 10 Saint-grade treasures can only be exchanged for 9 Saint-grade swords at most. Yi Xian nodded. Sure. The old man nodded slightly. Then please wait a moment. I'll get someone to handle it. With that, he was about to leave. At that moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior, there's one more thing. The old man looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian asked, May I know how big your Chamber of Commerce is? The old man said indifferently, My Million Treasures Chamber of Commerce is in every prosperous place in the never-ending star region. Yi Xian thought for a moment and said, I want to ask you for a small favor. The old man was a little wary. What favor? Yi Xian smiled and said, It's just a small favor, really? The old man said indifferently, Tell me about it. Yi Xian said, Senior, you should know that I'm from the Azure world and I have some friends in the Azure world. I have some things I want to bring to them. This chapter is not over. Please continue. But I can't leave this place now, so I want to ask you to send someone to help me. The old man glanced at Yi Xian. That's all? Yi Xian nodded. That's all. The old man asked again, Really? The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched. What does this old man mean? He doesn't trust me? At that moment, the old man said, If that's all, there's naturally no problem. Yi Xian flicked his finger and a spatial ring flew to the old man. The old man glanced at it and saw 50 million violet origin crystals. The old man looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian said, 50 million purple source crystals. Please help me get a saint-level saber, a saint-level whip, a saint-level body technique, and a saint-level whip treasure for me. Also, buy a saint-level physical cultivation method and martial arts technique. Please help me give the rest of the purple source crystals to them. The old man looked at the spatial ring in front of him. After a moment of silence, he looked at Yi Xian and said, 50 million violet origin crystals is not a small amount. Are you really going to give it to them? Yi Xian said with a smile, They are not strangers. They are my brothers, my best friends. The old man said in a deep voice, Don't you know that 1 grain of rice is a debt of gratitude and 1 grain of rice is a debt of enmity? Giving them so much at once, aren't you afraid? Yi Xian smiled and said, They are my best friends like my family. Do you understand? In fact, he had never forgotten Mo Yunchi and the others. Mo Yunchi and the others were in the Azure Firmament world. The resources there were limited, so their improvement was definitely very slow. But now that he had the strength, he naturally had to help them. Mo Yunchi and the others were talented. With a little help from him, Mo Yunchi and the others would definitely improve rapidly. Perhaps one day they would be able to fight side by side again. Simply put, don't forget your friends when you become rich. The old man said again, aren't you afraid that I will swallow your 50 million violet origin crystals? Yi Xian smiled and said, if senior's cultivation is only at this level, you wouldn't be sitting in the president's position. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and kept the spatial ring. I will get someone to do it. As for your sword, it will be in your hands tonight. After saying that, he turned around and left. In the room, Yi Xian sat quietly. At this moment, the past appeared in his mind. Mo Yunchi by Zhe Jianji Tuoba Yen Jiangjiu, and that Lian Wanli who liked to carry the Azure Dragon Saber. A familiar person, an unfamiliar environment. 4 hours later, the president of the Myriad Treasures Chamber of Commerce appeared in front of Yi Xian. With a tap of his finger, a spatial ring landed on the table in front of Yi Xian. In the spatial ring there were 9 sacred grade swords. Yi Xian kept the spatial ring. Farewell. After saying that, Yi Xian was about to leave. At this moment, the old man suddenly said, you want to go to the Great Wall of Heaven burial? Yi Xian stopped. How do you know? The old man said indifferently, not only my Myriad Treasures Chamber of Commerce knows, but many other forces also know. Yi Xian said, don't tell me they don't want me to go. The old man sneered, what do you think? Yi Xian fell silent. The old man said, I wish you a safe journey. Also, if you have any gains in the Great Wall of Heaven burial in the future, you're welcome to come to our Chamber of Commerce. Yi Xian smiled, definitely. Also, I'll leave the matter I entrusted to you. The old man said indifferently, don't worry, I'll definitely hand it over to them in good condition. Yi Xian cupped his fists, then I'll have to trouble you. Farewell. After saying that, he turned around and left. The old man looked in the direction in which Yi Xian left, and no one knew what he was thinking. After leaving the Myriad Treasures Chamber of Commerce, Yi Xian was about to conceal his aura, but it was already a little too late. This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. Divine senses directly locked onto him. Obviously, these people in the dark did not want him to go to the Great Wall of Heaven burial. Yi Xian looked around and then said, can't you all let me Yi Xian live? There was no response. Yi Xian smiled and then he looked at the Emperor Hound. Kill him. The Emperor Hound leaped up, and in the next moment, a shrill cry resounded from 300 m away. In next to no time, the experts in the dark retreated explosively. However, 2 divine senses still locked onto Yi Xian. The Emperor Hound returned to Yi Xian's side and shook its head. There are 2 more that I can't sense. Yi Xian said softly, looks like they're going to pay a heavy price to prevent me from going to the Great Wall of Heaven burial. The Emperor Hound said, are you still going? Yi Xian smiled, the more they don't want me to go, the more I want to go. Let's go. As soon as he finished speaking, he and the Emperor Hound vanished on the spot. Even after they left the city, the 2 divine senses still locked onto Yi Xian. Outside the city, Yi Xian suddenly said, Senior Emperor Hound, let me sit on you. You're faster. The Emperor Hound said angrily, don't even think about it. Yi Xian was puzzled, why? The Emperor Hound glared at Yi Xian, apart from the previous clan leader, no one has ever sat on me. Yi Xian said, there's a first time for everything. Are you looking for a beating? If you won't let me sit, then can I lie down? Hey, what are you doing? Don't hit me. In Weiyang City. With Yi Xian's departure, many experts in the city also left. Yi Xian was like a piece of hot gold. Everyone wanted it, but they were afraid of burning their hands. However, they were even more unwilling to give it up just like that. The top item on the interstellar bounty list. This was no longer a divine artifact, it was an existence that surpassed any divine artifact. Most importantly, Yi Xian was only at the Qi-controlling realm. This was also the reason why everyone didn't give up. Because there was hope, there was a possibility. Of course, after what Yi Xian had done in the Hellgate spread, some forces in the dark had already chosen to withdraw. No matter how good the treasure was, it was all bullshit without a life. Some people gave up, some people were unwilling. Bai Xiao Pavilion. In the highest level of a pavilion, Bai Xiao Xian sat by the window. From her position she could see most of the scenery of Weiyang City. A figure quietly appeared behind Bai Xiao Xian. Bai Xian said calmly, "Speak." The person said, "We have found out that the White Robes sect and the top aristocratic family of the southern region, the Huangfu family, are following him. Apart from them, there are also two mysterious forces." Bai Xian frowned. "Mysterious forces?" The person said in a deep voice, "Yes, I don't know who they are, but I think they might not be a force from our Weiyang galaxy." Bai Xian said, "You can't find out?" The person shook his head, "We really can't. Even elderly couldn't find out who they are." Hearing that, Bai Xian frowned deeply. Elderly? That was an existence that surpassed the sage state. Then the person said again, "I just don't know why they didn't make a move but only hid in the dark." Bai Xian stood up and looked at the end of the horizon. She said softly, "They are waiting for him to leave Weiyang City and its sphere of influence. Once he leaves, I'm afraid he won't be able to reach Burial City." P.S. I'm shameless enough to ask for a ticket. The top 10 of the monthly ticket ranking will get a bonus. I will never use this bonus to buy a healthcare service. End of this chapter. Chapter 439. The Great Wall of Sky Burial was located very far to the south of the Heaven region. Yi Xian did not know how far it was. He had heard that they had to go south and pass through the southern region. One could imagine how far the Great Wall of Sky Burial was. On the way, the Emperor Hound suddenly asked, "Why don't we use the teleportation array?" Before coming out, Yi Xian had asked around. There was a teleportation array in Weiyang City that could directly reach the southern region, but he did not choose to use it. Yi Xian said softly, "Let's just treat this journey as cultivation." Cultivation. Now that he had reached the qi-controlling realm, he still needed to do some research on this realm, especially on the use of qi. He hoped to reach the limit. The Emperor Hound glanced at Yi Xian. "That's true. I also need to cultivate if I follow you. Otherwise, I won't even know how I died." Yi Xian was speechless. The Emperor Hound flew in the air while Yi Xian flew on his sword. On the sword, Yi Xian closed his eyes and concentrated on his qi. Qi was everywhere. The qi-controlling realm referred to feeling qi, while the qi-controlling realm referred to controlling qi and using it. Many martial artists were able to do this, but none of them were able to do it to the extreme. Take Yi Xian for example. When his realm had fallen to the qi-changing realm, he had realized that he could do better. It was just that most people were more lenient with themselves, or rather, they were not that harsh on themselves. If he was harsh on himself, he would definitely reap unexpected rewards. The air around him surged. Yi Xian could clearly feel it. Soon, 50 qi swords appeared beside him. Each sword was condensed from qi and looked like a real sword. Yi Xian suddenly looked at the Emperor Hound not far away. "Senior, can I try?" The Emperor Hound said calmly, "Go ahead." As soon as it finished speaking, the 50 flying swords suddenly slashed at its body. Chi 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 chi. The 50 flying swords turned into nothingness, but the Emperor Hound was completely unharmed. The Emperor Hound sneered. Yi Xian was silent. Originally, he thought that his sword qi was strong enough, but now it seemed that he was overthinking it. At this time, the Emperor Dog suddenly said, "You're using me to practice your sword, are you stupid?" Yi Xian looked at the Emperor Hound and the Emperor Hound said, "My body is even stronger than the dragon race. How can your qi sword hurt me?" Yi Xian asked, "What if the qi sword can hurt you?" The Emperor Hound shook its head. "A pure sword qi is absolutely impossible." Yi Xian whispered, "What if I can?" As the sound of his voice faded, he waved his right hand and an energy sword appeared once more. He began to compress this energy sword in a frenzy, but very soon, boom! The qi sword shattered with a loud bang, turning into a stream of air and dissipating. Yi Xian was stunned. The Emperor Dog said, "He's too hasty. He's going too far." Yi Xian was deep in thought. After a while, he continued, "Just like that, he compressed the energy sword again and again, but almost all of them failed. Even though the quality of the energy sword would improve when it was compressed, the energy within it wasn't able to endure such a compression." Yi Xian gazed silently at the energy sword before him. Why didn't he improve the quality of his energy? Suddenly, a thought entered Yi Xian's mind. Yi Xian's figure shook, and then he waved his hand, causing the energy sword to vanish. After that, he made a grasping motion with his right hand, and it didn't take long for countless streams of energy to converge towards him. It didn't take long for the energy to condense into the shape of a sword, and it didn't take long for the energy to condense into a sword. It was a sword. Yi Xian stretched out his hand and grabbed it. At this moment, the energy sword couldn't be considered to be illusory, because what he held in his hand felt real. Yi Xian suddenly opened his palm. In the next moment, a ray of sword light flashed by. A sharp sound of something tearing resounded. A ray of light instantly slashed against the Emperor Hound from over 30 m away. Bang! An ear-piercing explosion resounded, and sparks sprayed everywhere the sword slashed. The Emperor Hound frowned a little because there was a faint mark on the spot where it had been struck. Yi Xian was delighted when he witnessed this scene. Because it was feasible. Continue condensing it. Yi Xian condensed it over and over again, and the energy sword he condensed every single time was much more solid than the last. At the same time, its strength grew stronger and stronger. The Emperor Hound remained vigilant all along the way, because it could sense a few obscure auras in the surroundings. However, these auras were extremely obscure, and even the Emperor Hound wasn't able to pinpoint their exact location. Yi Xian was aware of this as well, but he had no other choice. Needless to say, he was in a very passive situation right now. Just like that, Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound finally entered the Southern Territory 3 days later. Yi Xian said, "South Sky City is up ahead, and there's a teleportation formation there that can teleport us directly to the Great Wall of Heaven gravestone. Let's head to the city." The Emperor Hound spoke solemnly, "Indeed. We have to get there as soon as possible." Yi Xian nodded, "Let's go." As he spoke, he started to speed up. An hour later, Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound arrived at South Sky City. Yi Xian asked around as soon as he entered the city, and then he headed straight for the teleportation formation that led to the Great Wall of Heaven gravestone. However, their expressions instantly turned cold when they arrived at the teleportation formation. Only ruins remained on the teleportation formation that led to the Great Wall of Heaven gravestone. The Emperor Hound spoke solemnly by Yi Xian's side, "Looks like they don't want you to be buried in the Great Wall of Heaven gravestone." Yi Xian fell silent for a moment, and then he led the Emperor Hound to a restaurant. As soon as they entered the restaurant, a young man hurriedly came over to greet them. Yi Xian smiled, "I want to inquire about something. Are there other teleportation formations that lead to the Great Wall of Heaven gravestone?" The young man glanced at Yi Xian with a slightly vigilant expression. Meanwhile, Yi Xian flicked his finger and a spatial ring fell to the young man. The young man glanced at it and his eyes instantly lit up. "Yes, there are teleportation formations that lead to the Great Wall of Heaven gravestone. The Huangfu clan built a teleportation formation there, and not only does it lead to the Great Wall of Heaven gravestone, it can also go to the Heaven region and the Southern Territory." Yi Xian frowned slightly. "The Huangfu clan?" The young man looked at Yi Xian. "You're not from the Southern Territory, right?" Yi Xian nodded. The young man smiled. "No wonder. The Huangfu clan is the #1 clan in the Southern Territory. If you want to go to the Great Wall of Heaven gravestone, then besides the teleportation formation, you can only go to the Huangfu clan." "The Huangfu clan." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "I understand. Thank you." The young man hurriedly said with a smile, "No problem." Yi Xian nodded and turned to leave with the Monarch Hound. Outside the restaurant, Yi Xian said softly, "The Huangfu clan?" The Monarch Hound said, "Do you want to go?" Yi Xian said solemnly, "No matter what, we have to go. Otherwise, if we hurry to the Great Wall of Heaven gravestone, I'm afraid we'll be in grave danger." The Monarch Hound said, "I don't understand, why don't they attack now?" Yi Xian said softly, "Maybe they're waiting for something." The Monarch Hound looked at Yi Xian. This time they might be serious. Yi Xian fell silent. The reason why they hadn't attacked since the beginning was probably because they were waiting to see if he had any trump cards. They were waiting to see if he had any trump cards. Now that he was about to enter the Great Wall of Heaven gravestone, the other party clearly didn't want to wait any longer. They didn't want to wait, they had to attack. Once the other party attacked, they must be well prepared, because he had exposed too much before. The other party should be very clear about his and the Monarch Hound's strength. At that moment, Yi Xian realized that his current situation was very, very bad. The Monarch Hound said, "Go to the Huangfu clan or?" Yi Xian shook his head. "The Huangfu clan is the #1 family in the southern region. They must have known that we're coming. We're not related to them, they definitely won't offend the big shots behind them for us." Saying that, he looked around. "So, we have to find another way." The Monarch Hound looked around. "Do as you see fit. In any case, I can't beat too many of them." Yi Xian smiled. "Let's go out of the city." Saying that, he led the Monarch Hound out of the city. Outside the city, Yi Xian opened his right hand, and a fairy spirit sword appeared in his palm. The next moment he stabbed the sword into the ground. Crack. With him as the center, the ground within the radius of the 100 tribes directly cracked. Yi Xian looked around and smiled. "Everyone don't hide." Those who want me Yi Xian to die, come out. There was no movement in the surroundings. Yi Xian was about to speak, but at that moment, an old man suddenly appeared not far away. The old man was dressed in a black robe, his face could not be seen. Yi Xian smiled, "You're finally willing to come out?" The black robe said, "Yi Xian, we don't want to be enemies with you as long as you leave that treasure behind, we'll leave immediately." Yi Xian smiled, "What if I don't?" The black robe man shook his head, "Yi Xian, we've been observing you for a long time these few days, you're not a stupid person. You should know that if you keep that treasure, it will only bring you death. You're a smart person, you should know what to do." Yi Xian smiled, "Will all of you really let me live if I hand that treasure over?" The black robe said, "We only want that treasure. If you hand it over, then the old man can guarantee that we'll absolutely not make a move against you." Yi Xian shook his head, "All of you won't let me go?" The black robe man asked, "Why?" Yi Xian said, "Because all of you will be afraid that I'll come looking for all of you to take revenge once I grow stronger. So, all of you will definitely choose to eliminate me once you obtain the treasure, right?" The black robe man fell silent. Yi Xian continued, "Actually, all of you should be clearly aware that I, Yi Xian, have a huge background. Even though the treasure is great, is it really worth using my life to exchange for it? Why don't all of you sit down and drink some tea and chat?" The black robe man fell silent for a moment and then he said, "You're really dreaming. Yi Xian, the old man will ask you one last time, will you hand over that treasure or not?" At this point he paused slightly and then he said, "Perhaps you should experience our strength. Perhaps then you'll change your decision." As soon as he finished speaking, 12 black-robed men suddenly appeared behind him. At the same time, another 12 black-robed men appeared behind Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound. All of these black-robed men were at the Saint Realm. 24 Saint Realm experts. At this moment, the Emperor Hound's expression changed. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly as well. "All of you really think highly of me? This is too fucking bullying." At this point he looked at the Emperor Hound, "What do you think?" The Emperor Hound's face was expressionless. "What do you think?" Yi Xian pondered slightly, and then he flew directly behind the Emperor Hound. "What are you still looking at? Hurry up and fucking retreat." The Emperor Hound. Chapter 440. The Emperor Hound was stunned when it heard Yi Xian's words. In the next moment, it turned around and disappeared into the horizon. The black-robed man and the others were stunned. They ran away? They ran away just like that? To be honest, even though there were 24 saints among them, they were still very cautious just now because they were afraid that Yi Xian might have a trump card. Therefore they had been on their guard just now, ready to deal with any possibility at any time. However, they didn't expect Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound to run away. They had been secretly observing Yi Xian recently. Yi Xian wasn't a coward, however, Yi Xian had run away so directly at this moment. After about 2 breaths of silence, the black-robed man suddenly said, "Go after them." The 24 people disappeared as soon as he finished speaking. At the end of the horizon, Yi Xian sat on the Emperor Hound's back as the hound ran wildly. It had to be said that an Emperor Hound at full speed was extremely terrifying. At least, ordinary saints would never be able to catch up. In the sky. "Hoodwinker Yi, isn't it embarrassing for us to run like this? Can you fight 20 Sage Realm experts? If you can, let's go back and beat them up." "Why do I have to fight 20? Why don't you fight 19? I'll fight 5. Can't you be more shameless? Stop talking. They're catching up. Hurry up and run." More than 20 saints chased after Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound. However, there was still a gap between their speed and the Emperor Hound's. Therefore they could only barely keep up. However, they had no intention of giving up. Once Yi Xian entered the Great Wall of Sky Burial, things would become very troublesome. That place was very complicated. Even they didn't want to go there. Therefore they had to stop Yi Xian before he entered the Great Wall of Sky Burial. Everyone sped up at full speed. Weiyang City. Inside Weiyang Palace, the Lord of Weiyang Starfield stood above the palace. She looked at the end of the horizon, lost in thought. After an unknown period of time, Weiyang Tian waved her right hand, and an illusory starry palace appeared in the air. She walked into the palace and there were 6 chairs inside. Soon an old man walked into the hall. The old man wore a plain robe. He was thin but his back was ramrod straight. His eyebrows were extremely long, reaching his chest. He wore a pair of very ordinary cloth shoes. After the elder entered the hall, he nodded slightly at endless heaven before walking to the side and sitting down. "Midnight Tendo, Brother Qingnong, it's still so early. The old man called Qing Nong smiled, I don't like to let others wait for me. As he spoke, he glanced at the chairs on the right and was a little surprised. Palace Master, there's one more? Wei Yang Tian nodded, Ghost Sect Master Li Zhangfeng. Hearing this, Qing Nong said softly, no wonder. At this moment another person walked in. It was a woman. This person was Bai Xiaoxian. Qing Nong nodded in greeting and Bai Xiaoxian nodded in response. Then she found her seat and sat down. Soon another man walked in. This person was Li Zhangfeng, who had just broken through not long ago. After Li Zhangfeng entered, he cupped his fists at the three people in the hall, then walked to the side and sat down. There were only 2 empty chairs left in the hall. Just like that, after an unknown period of time, no one came. Endless Heaven was expressionless. In the next moment she suddenly disappeared. Seeing this, Qing Nong and the others in the hall, as well as Bai Xiaoxian, had grim expressions. They knew that this Endless Palace Master was angry. In an instant, Endless Heaven arrived at the Holy Land. As soon as she arrived, a voice suddenly sounded, Palace Master Endless? Endless Heaven suddenly stomped her right foot lightly. Boom. The entire Holy Land shook violently, and the ground began to crack. Endless Heaven. A voice suddenly sounded from the depths of the Holy Land. Then a powerful aura suddenly swept out, heading straight for Endless Heaven. In the air, Endless Heaven raised her palm and slapped. Boom. The aura instantly shattered. At the same time, a powerful force swept towards the Holy Land like a volcanic eruption. This was destroying the Holy Land. Right at this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared in front of Endless Heaven. In the next moment, he lightly brushed his right hand forward, and the surroundings suddenly fell silent. The powerful force started to gradually vanish. Endless Heaven's sudden disappearance caused the middle-aged man's expression to change, and he slammed his fist forward. Boom. The middle-aged man retreated by over 3 m, and the Saint Palace behind him directly shattered. The middle-aged man's expression instantly became extremely unsightly when he saw this scene. In the distance, Endless Heaven glanced coldly at the man. Wuxia Ran, I know you've broken through. Do you want to give it a try? If you lose, I'll slaughter everyone in your holy land. The man called Wuxia Ran stared fixedly at Endless Heaven. What exactly are you trying to do? Endless Heaven didn't speak, and she raised her hand and slammed her fist forward. Wuxia Ran's expression changed, and he similarly slammed his fist forward. Boom. The entire sky shook violently, and Wuxia Ran retreated by over 30 m. Wuxia Ran stared fixedly at Endless Heaven. Endless Heaven looked coldly at Wuxia Ran. From this moment onward, no one in the Holy Land is allowed to take a step out of the Holy Land, including you, Wuxia Ran. Otherwise I'll annihilate all of you. As her voice fell, she had already disappeared. In the air, Wuxia Ran's expression was extremely ugly to look at. After Endless Heaven left the Holy Land, she directly appeared on a certain street in Endless City. The street was very quiet, and there was only a woman holding a small cloth bag painting on the wall. Endless Heaven walked in front of the woman, and the woman laughed, Congratulations Palace Lord for your great increase in strength. Endless Heaven walked in front of the woman, and she looked at the painting on the wall. It was a flower, a snow lotus, and it was extremely lifelike as though it was real. Endless Heaven looked at the flower without saying a word. The woman suddenly kept her brush and laughed, Palace Lord, aren't you afraid of angering that fellow in the Holy Land, and he'll bring the Holy Land to side with the Moke clan? Endless Heaven replied indifferently, Why don't you lend him 10 guts? The woman laughed, You're too overbearing. That Wuxia Ran's cultivation has increased greatly. He was late this time because he wanted to test your strength. Of course, he didn't expect that while he was improving, you were also improving. After this time, he'll definitely be obedient. Endless Heaven said softly, In the entire Endless City, you're the one I can't see through the most. The woman looked at Endless Heaven. Why are you looking at me? I'm not a threat to you and I don't fight for anything. I just want to paint. Endless Heaven fell silent for a moment, and then he said, You've met him? The woman said with a smile, Are you talking about that little guy called Yi Xian? Yes, I have. He said I'm a good painter, a little fellow with good taste. Endless Heaven didn't speak. Meanwhile, the woman suddenly said, A few months ago, I went to the Moke clan. Endless Heaven said softly, Master Painter, remember, you're from the Endless Starfield. The woman smiled slightly, That's why the Endless Starfield hasn't fallen. Endless Tendo said, I need your help. Endless Heaven Tendo said, Save that little fellow? Endless Heaven Tendo said, It's not convenient for me to help. Once I do, the various powers of the endless starfield will think that I'm trying to take the treasure for myself. At that time, there will be internal strife in the endless starfield. The woman laughed. If I help, there won't be so much trouble. Endless Heaven nodded. The painter looked at Endless Heaven. I'm curious, why are you helping him? Endless Tendo said, I choose not to answer. Endless Heaven smiled, then I choose not to help. Endless Heaven turned and left. The painter turned and left. The artist smiled and continued with the next painting. At that moment, Endless Heaven suddenly said, Painter, once this is over, let's fight. To be honest, I've been wanting to beat you up for a long time. With that, she vanished. The painter shook her head, smiled, and continued painting. North Region. In the palace beneath the Dao E Academy. A flaming woman sat cross-legged on the ground, and raging flames were emitting from her body. This woman was the Dao Law of the fourth pavilion Yinjia. Not far from Yinjia was Yi Xian's master Yu Qi. At that moment, Yinjia suddenly stood up. Yu Qi looked at her. You've recovered? Yinjia nodded slightly. I'm leaving. Are you coming with me? Yu Qi said softly, Are you going to find him? Yinjia shook her head. To find the Dao Law of the fifth pavilion. Yu Qi frowned. The fifth pavilion? Yinjia looked outside. I've sensed that the fifth pavilion has awakened. If there's no Dao Law to keep him in check once he comes out, is it serious? Yu Qi asked. Yinjia said softly, It's more than serious. That guy had fought against the prison pagoda before, even though he lost. Although he lost, you don't know what that means. Yu Qi said in a low voice, He's in danger. Yinjia nodded, Very dangerous. Yu Qi said, He's very good at bluffing. Yinjia rolled her eyes. Do you think everyone will fall for that? I must find the fifth pavilion. Only it can keep the fifth pavilion in check. I hope I can make it in time. With that, she looked at Yu Qi. Are you coming with me? Yu Qi said softly, Yes, but I'm afraid I'll drag you down. Yinjia smiled, I won't. Yu Qi nodded, Then let's go. Yinjia pulled Yu Qi, Let's go. With that, the two girls disappeared. What's the fifth pavilion? A very funny guy, and also a very thick-skinned guy, almost as thick as Yi Xian. Southern Region. In the sky, Yi Xian sat on the Emperor Hound and ran wildly. Behind them, the Saint Realm experts were still chasing them. On the Emperor Hound's back, Yi Xian suddenly said, Brother Emperor, how can you recover your strength? The Emperor Hound said coldly, Don't even think about doing anything to me now. What? Yi Xian didn't understand. The Emperor Hound said, My inner core is broken. I can only use my innate divine abilities if I reform my inner core. To reform my inner core, it will take at least 100 years. 100 years. Yi Xian's face twitched. 100 years? Is there no other way? The Emperor Hound said, There is. Yi Xian hurriedly said, What is it? The Emperor Hound said, Devour demonic beasts of the same level? Find me a few dozen true dragons for me to devour. I can definitely recover. Yi Xian said seriously, A few dozen true dragons, can we beat them? The Emperor Hound said, Each true dragon is equivalent to a peak Saint Realm expert, and its combat power is at least 10 times that of a peak Saint Realm expert, several times stronger than me now. Yi Xian was silent for a moment, then said, Brother Emperor, just pretend I didn't say anything before. P.S. Actually, I am a very fragile person. Every time I see the readers scold me, I want to jump off a building. Fortunately, the experts advised me to be thick-skinned. This way, no matter how the readers scold me, they won't have the thought of suicide. According to the experts' research, thick-skinned people can increase their confidence and strengthen their hearts. Chapter 441. About an hour later, Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound arrived at the surface of the sea. Looking down from above, the entire sea was filled with islands. Yi Xian suddenly said, Brother Emperor, can you shake them off? The Emperor Hound shook its head, I can't. Yi Xian was puzzled, why? The Emperor Hound said in a deep voice, There are several obscure auras in front of me? Hearing this, Yi Xian's face instantly darkened. You mean they might be above the Saint Realm? The Emperor Hound nodded, Even if they are not above the Saint Realm, they are at least on par with Li Zhangfeng when he was at the Saint Realm. I can at most delay existences of this level for a while. As it spoke, it paused for a moment, then said, You have to think of a way. A way? Yi Xian smiled bitterly. What could he do? The only way was to perish together with these guys. However, he wasn't willing to give up just like that. Extremely unwilling. In fact, he was afraid of death most of the time. Of course, if he had to die, Yi Xian would do anything. At this moment, the Emperor Hound suddenly said, I just don't know why they haven't made a move yet. Yi Xian was silent, he didn't know why they hadn't made a move yet. What were they waiting for? The Emperor Hound suddenly said, Kid, why don't you call your sister over? Jianzizai. Yi Xian smiled bitterly in his heart, he wanted to call her too. With big sister Jianzizai here, the surrounding people were all floating clouds. The problem was, he didn't even know how to contact Jianzizai. At this moment, the Emperor Hound said, Kid, don't tell me you can't contact her? Yi Xian said seriously, how is that possible? I don't want to call her. The Emperor Hound was puzzled, why? Yi Xian said seriously, think about it, why did she leave? That's because she wanted to train me. And you. If we call her when we are in danger, what do you think she will think of us? She will look down on us. The Emperor Hound was silent. Yi Xian continued, so this time we have to settle it ourselves. The Emperor Dog looked at Yi Xian and asked, how do we solve this? How about you fight 20 and leave the rest to me? Yi Xian was speechless. The Emperor Hound sighed softly, I can't beat him. Not only can I not beat him, but I can't even outrun him. As he said that, he looked at Yi Xian and said, don't you have a lot of ideas? Come up with an idea. Yi Xian was silent. Right now, he was thinking about what would happen if he activated the Realm Prison Pagoda again. Nothing good would come out of it. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly patted the Archhound's back. Brother D, stop. The Emperor Dog asked, are you sure? Yi Xian nodded. The Emperor Hound immediately stopped. Not even 3 breaths of time had passed. People appeared around them, and the person in the lead was the black-robed man from before. The black-robed man stared at Yi Xian and said, what, you're not running anymore? Yi Xian smiled and said, I don't want to run anymore. The black-robed man slowly clenched his right hand. Soon the seawater below suddenly trembled. Clearly the other party wanted to directly attack. The Emperor Dog suddenly said, Kid, do you have any tricks up your sleeve? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. No tricks. I just feel that there's no point in continuing to run. In any case, I can't escape. Since I can't escape, I might as well fight to my heart's content. Brother D, I won't take advantage of you. How about we split it later? The Emperor Dog was silent for a moment, then laughed and said, all right, let's fight to our heart's content. As its voice fell, it directly leaped towards the black-robed old man not far away. The black-robed old man suddenly slammed his palm down. Boom. The sky shook violently. The black-robed old man and the Emperor Dog retreated rapidly. But soon the Emperor Dog once again rushed towards the black-robed old man. Soon it was blocked by a dozen Saint Realm experts. Soon the Emperor Dog was surrounded. On the other hand, 10 Saint Realm experts had surrounded Yi Xian. The 10 of them hadn't attacked, but their auras were locked tightly onto Yi Xian. 1 against 10? Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He knew his own strength. Perhaps he could fight 3 at once, but he couldn't fight 10 at once. However, he was even more aware of the situation he was in. He had to do it even if he couldn't. He had no way out. The only way was to fight. Yi Xian opened his palm and a sword silently appeared. The Saint Realm experts in the surroundings instantly became vigilant as soon as the sword appeared. They were very clear about Yi Xian's strength. After all, Yi Xian had killed Saint Realm experts with ease when he was at the Hellgate. Therefore they didn't dare underestimate Yi Xian at all. Yi Xian didn't attack immediately after he unsheathed his sword because the auras of the 10 people in front of him were integrated. They would attack together if he moved. The 10 Saint Realm experts didn't attack as well. They were waiting for Yi Xian to attack as well. The first to attack would be the first to reveal an opening. On the other side, the Emperor Dog and the 10 Saint Realm experts were engaged in an extremely intense battle. The islands below them were crushed into powder by their battle intent, and a huge amount of seawater was lifted up and transformed into waves that surged in all directions. Yi Xian held his sword tightly in his right hand. He was confident that he could kill a Saint Realm expert in an instant if he was facing one person. However, he wasn't confident that he could kill 10 people at once. After around 15 minutes, Yi Xian suddenly raised his head. The sword in his hand had turned into the soul-suppressing sword. At the instant the soul-suppression sword appeared, a Saint Realm expert that was over 100 m away suddenly fell to the ground. At the same time, a shrill and miserable cry resounded. Soul Reaper. Yi Xian naturally didn't forget what Little Soul had said. She could reaper the soul of a powerhouse within a certain distance. Of course, she needed Yi Xian as a medium. Yi Xian did not stop after the soul-suppressing sword had instantly killed a Saint Realm cultivator. In the next moment, he held the sword and pointed it at the Saint Realm cultivator not far away. The Saint Realm cultivator's expression changed drastically, and he retreated. However, as he retreated, his body fell straight down. At the same time, a ray of black light entered the soul-suppressing sword. He had killed 2 Saint Realm experts in an instant. However, Yi Xian's face was extremely pale. Limit. The soul-suppressing sword could only be used twice a day. He had already used it all. If he used it again, the soul-suppressing sword would absorb his soul. In other words, his soul would be devoured by the soul-suppressing sword. If Little Soul hadn't actively cooperated, he could only use it once at most. However, he felt that something was wrong with his body now. It was as if he had lost something. He knew that his soul had been greatly affected. He couldn't use it again. All the Saint Realm experts in the surroundings had retreated by 300 m. They were extremely fearful of the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian forcefully endured the discomfort in his body. He looked around and grinned. Who's next? As he spoke, he tapped the soul-suppressing sword lightly on his palm. The surroundings around Yi Xian were extremely silent. None of the Saint Realm experts dared to move. Whoever he pointed at would die. Who the fuck dared to move? Yi Xian laughed coldly. Do all of you know who I am? You don't? Come, let's sit down and have a good chat. I'll tell all of you who I am and who's standing behind me. As he spoke, he started to secretly and madly devour the violet origin crystals in his arms. He's buying time. Suddenly a voice resounded. The corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched when he heard this. The Saint Realm experts exchanged glances and were about to attack. However, the soul-suppressing sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly vanished, and then a new sword appeared in front of him. It was the sword at the top of the pagoda. As soon as it appeared here, the heavens and the earth here had instantly changed. At the same time, a monstrous aura appeared here. The 8 Saint Realm experts in front of him were horrified, and they retreated repeatedly by over 300 m. They stared fixedly at the sword in front of Yi Xian while their eyes were filled with fear. They were even more fearful than they were when they saw the soul-suppressing sword. Yi Xian gazed at the 8 Saint Realm experts and spoke indifferently. Do you know what sword it is? All of them gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, It's called the Origin Sword. It's the origin sword of I, Yi Xian, and it was born because of me. The sword in front of him suddenly trembled slightly while numerous sword howls resounded incessantly. Moreover, a strand of sword aura enveloped Yi Xian. Yi Xian's eyelids twitched and he hurriedly said in his heart, Give me some face. Meanwhile, the sword suddenly pressed against the center of his forehead. Yi Xian was speechless. Chapter 442. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned. What's going on? Yi Xian's face darkened. What's wrong with that sword? Isn't it a little too hot-tempered? The 8 Saint Realm experts exchanged glances, and they didn't know what to do for a while. Right at this moment, the pagoda suddenly shook. There seemed to be some movement on the 5th floor. Yi Xian's expression changed when he sensed this. Is the 5th floor about to come out? Meanwhile, the sword that was pressing against his forehead suddenly transformed into a ray of light and vanished. When it appeared again, it was back at the top of the pagoda. At the same time, the 5th floor fell completely silent. Yi Xian was speechless. In the distance, the 8 Saint Realm experts looked at each other. What the hell is Yi Xian doing? Yi Xian calmed himself down and gazed at them. Come on, let's continue. The 8 of them didn't attack. They didn't dare. Yi Xian really has a lot of tricks up his sleeves. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly looked to the right. The Emperor Hound was being suppressed. Although the Emperor Hound was powerful, it was still extremely strenuous for it to fight over a dozen Saint Realm experts. Fortunately, its physical body was extremely strong, so even though the Saint Realm experts were suppressing it, they weren't able to kill it immediately. They didn't dare to continue like this because it would be very bad for the Emperor Hound. Yi Xian's expression was grim. He knew that he and the Emperor Hound couldn't continue fighting for much longer, because they didn't know how many more people were behind them. Yi Xian looked up at the 8 people in front of him. In the next moment, a sword of energy suddenly appeared in his hand, and then it vanished in the blink of an eye. The 8 of them suddenly attacked in unison. Bang! Yi Xian's sword of energy shattered. Meanwhile, Yi Xian suddenly vanished as well, and the howl of a sword tore through the sky. The 8 Saint Realm experts suddenly vanished, and it didn't take long for the ray of light that had just appeared to shatter. At the same time, a figure retreated explosively. This figure was Yi Xian. After Yi Xian had retreated several thousand feet, he suddenly thrust the Qi sword in his right hand forward. This sword pierced through space and arrived in front of a Saint Realm expert. But in the next moment this chi sword shattered. Boom. The sky shook violently. A figure suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. Yi Xian stomped his right foot lightly on the ground, and then 10 energy swords suddenly appeared around him. In the next moment, rays of light flashed horizontally and vertically, and then numerous sounds of slicing resounded incessantly. The saint who had rushed in front of him was cut into pieces by these chi swords. However, several powerful forces bombarded his body. Bang! Yi Xian instantly retreated 1,000 feet. As soon as he stopped, blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. Although he was wearing the God Legion set, it couldn't completely block the power. At this moment, his insides were surging and it was extremely uncomfortable. The Saint Realm expert didn't give Yi Xian a chance to catch his breath. At the instant that Yi Xian was blasted flying, the 7 of them vanished at the same time, and then the space in the surroundings instantly started to tremble violently like a tidal wave. How terrifying would the combined attack of 7 experts be? Yi Xian's expression changed. He opened his right hand, and the immortal spirit sword appeared in his grasp. In the next moment, he suddenly slashed forward with the sword in his grasp. Space was instantly torn apart by this single slash. However, Yi Xian's figure was blasted flying in the next moment. Over 1 kilometer away, Yi Xian had just stopped moving when a spear suddenly stabbed against his chest. His entire body shook violently as he retreated explosively. As he retreated, he suddenly held the sword in his left hand and pressed the fingers of his right hand together before slashing forward. The head of the Saint Realm expert in front of him flew off, but at this moment, several shadows flashed past him. In the next moment, Yi Xian's head tilted to the side, and he dodged a fatal blow. However, his entire body felt as if it had been hit hard, and he retreated explosively again. Before he could stop, another Saint Realm expert once again punched his abdomen. Bang! Yi Xian's entire body arched as he retreated explosively for almost 1 kilometer. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, he once again felt several forces sweeping towards him in front of him. The corner of Yi Xian's mouth curled up into a sinister smile. He was just about to take out the World Prison Pagoda when a powerful aura suddenly appeared in front of him. Very quickly, a claw quickly slapped towards the group of Saint Realm experts in front of Yi Xian. Boom! The claw fell, and 6 Saint Realm experts were blasted away. In front of Yi Xian was a demonic beast. The Great God on the 2nd floor. The Great God on the 2nd floor looked coldly at the 6 Saint Realm experts in front of her, her eyes as cold as ice. The 6 Saint Realm experts suddenly retreated a few hundred meters, and then stood there quietly. At this time, an old man in a plain robe silently appeared in front of the Great God on the 2nd floor. The old man in the plain robe glanced at the Great God on the 2nd floor and said softly, "You should be his last trump card, right?" The Great God on the 2nd floor did not answer the old man in the plain robe. She turned to look at Yi Xian and Yi Xian grinned, "Long time no see." The Great God on the 2nd floor said, "Every time you come out, you're in such a miserable state." Yi Xian smiled bitterly, "I don't want to be like this either." The Great God on the 2nd floor turned to look around and then said softly, "You go first." Yi Xian's expression changed, "This old man is so strong?" The Great God on the 2nd floor glanced at him indifferently, "There are still people in the dark." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Great God on the 2nd floor, you can't beat him?" The Great God on the 2nd floor shook his head, "The Great God on the 5th floor is playing tricks. He doesn't want me to help you and has been secretly restraining me. I can't come out." The 5th floor. Yi Xian was stunned and then said, Why? I have no enmity with him." The Great God on the 2nd floor glanced at Yi Xian. "He wants to come out. And if he wants to come out, he has to get rid of you first." "Yi Xian," the Great God on the 2nd floor said softly, "You go first." Yi Xian shook his head. The Great God on the 2nd floor said calmly, "Can you beat him?" Yi Xian was silent. The Great God on the 2nd floor said, "It's useless for you to stay here, don't let your emotions affect your decisions." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "You're in danger, right?" The Great God on the 2nd floor said, "If the Great God on the 5th floor is not playing tricks." As she said that, she looked around, "It's just a clone, it won't hurt the main body. Go." As soon as she said that, her right hand suddenly clawed at the right side. Boom. The space suddenly trembled and not far away, the Saint Realm experts around the Emperor Hound retreated. At that moment, the old man not far away was about to attack, but the Great God on the 2nd floor turned around and clawed at him. Boom. The old man in the plain robe retreated more than 1,000 feet. No one saw how the old man in the plain robe was repelled. The old man in the plain robe looked at the great god on the second floor, his eyes narrowed slightly. You are not a demon beast of the never-ending star field. The great god on the second floor did not answer. She turned to look at Yi Xian and the Emperor Hound. Go. If you don't go, I will go. Yi Xian was silent for a moment. Take care. With that, his figure trembled, and he appeared directly on the Emperor Hound. The Emperor Hound glanced at the great god on the second floor, then turned around and ran. Soon the Emperor Hound and Yi Xian disappeared. At the end of the boundless horizon, the great god on the second floor turned to look at the old man in the plain robe and the others. Attack together. Attack together. The old man in the plain robe stared at the great god on the second floor and smiled slightly. No need. With that, he gently stomped his right foot. In an instant, the space around the great god on the second floor cracked layer by layer, and countless spatial cracks appeared. Soon the space around the great god on the second floor was completely torn apart, but the great god on the second floor was completely unharmed. At the same time, the torn space returned to normal. Seeing this, the old man in the plain robe frowned. You? At that moment, the great god on the second floor suddenly disappeared. Not far away, the old man in the plain robe's expression changed drastically, and he suddenly pressed his hands forward lightly. All creation ashes. With that, two balls of flame suddenly swept out from the center of his palms. For a moment, the entire horizon seemed to be boiling, and the Saint Realm experts behind him were shocked, and they all retreated rapidly. At that moment, an angry roar suddenly came from the sky. As the roar rang out, the Saint Realm experts in the field instantly bled from their orifices. At the same time, the flames in the void in the horizon disappeared completely, and a figure retreated rapidly. It was the old man in the plain robe. Under the gaze of the Saint Realm experts, the old man in the plain robe retreated hundreds of feet before stopping, and as soon as he stopped, a claw directly slapped the top of his head. Boom! The old man in the plain robe exploded instantly, and even his soul was gone. The great god on the second floor turned to look to the right, and there, a shadow quietly condensed there. The great god on the second floor said coldly, "Are you willing to come out?" The shadow said, "Do you really think you can protect him?" The eyes of the great god on the second floor narrowed slightly. "You still have people." The shadow said, "I think you should be his last trump card. By the way, you were the one who secretly helped him in the Azure world back then, right?" The great god on the second floor looked at the shadow and did not speak. The shadow turned to look at the horizon and said softly, "At this time, they should have already made their move." The great god on the second floor looked at the shadow. "You want that treasure, but the funny thing is that you don't even know what it is." The shadow said softly, "I don't know, but so what?" The great god on the second floor shook her head. "You don't know how much you are courting death now." As her voice fell, she directly rushed out. The shadow suddenly disappeared, and the next moment, a pitch-black shadow appeared in the field, covering the entire horizon. At the end of the distant horizon, Yi Xian and the Emperor Dog suddenly stopped. Because not far in front of them, stood a middle-aged man. The middle-aged man smiled slightly. "I've been waiting for a long time." Yi Xian looked at the middle-aged man. "Brother D, can you beat him?" The Emperor Dog glanced at the middle-aged man and shook its head. "This person is above the Saint Realm." "Above the Saint Realm?" Yi Xian smiled. "You really think highly of me?" The middle-aged man smiled. "I've been watching you for a long time. Of course, we are not stupid enough to send small fries to train you. Either don't make a move or do your best." Yi Xian smiled faintly. "Go all out." As his voice fell, he jumped in front of the middle-aged man and walked towards him. "Brother D, I'll leave the rest to you." As his voice fell, an illusory Xiaota quietly condensed between his eyebrows. Yi Xian still had a smile on his face, but this smile was a little ferocious. "I will also do my best with all my strength to perish together. P.S. I'm going to keep a low profile for now. I'll brag to everyone when the time comes." Chapter 443. Take them down with you. Yi Xian didn't want to die as well, but he had no other choice at this moment. If he had to die, then why didn't he drag a few down with him? He disregarded everything. When the pagoda appeared, the Emperor Hound's expression had instantly changed. It had always been extremely vigilant towards Yi Xian's pagoda. Meanwhile, the middle-aged man's expression had become extremely solemn when he saw the illusory Xiaota between Yi Xian's brows. At the instant that Yi Xian had activated the pagoda, the fifth floor had suddenly trembled violently. Xiao Ling blinked within the first floor. A moment later, she ran to the top of the pagoda and hugged the sword tightly while chanting something. It didn't take long for the fifth floor to start trembling. Yi Xian suddenly frowned because the pagoda hadn't emerged. What's going on? Suddenly the entire pagoda shook. Yi Xian seemed as if he'd suffered a heavy blow, and blood flowed out of all his apertures. The middle-aged man was stunned when he witnessed this scene, and then he said, "He's suffering from backlash?" As he spoke, he was just about to attack when a sword howl suddenly resounded. The middle-aged man's expression changed slightly when he heard this sword howl, and he hurriedly stopped. He stared fixedly at Yi Xian because the sword howl had come from within Yi Xian's body. The cry of the sword was breathtaking. The middle-aged man clenched his right fist tightly, and his face was filled with vigilance. Meanwhile, Yi Xian had suddenly fallen to the ground. At the instant that he fell, he felt like something was roiling within his body. The fifth floor is about to emerge? Suddenly, the sword at the top of the pagoda shook violently. The fifth floor fell silent. But it didn't take long for the fifth floor to shake violently as if it was about to explode. Suddenly, the sword at the top of the pagoda flew out and into the fifth floor. After around 15 minutes of silence, a sword suddenly flew out, and it didn't take long for it to appear in front of Yi Xian. When he saw this sword, the middle-aged man's face changed, and he retreated 100 zhang. The sword paid no attention to the middle-aged man, and it just tapped Yi Xian's head 3 times with its blade. In the next moment it suddenly turned around and a ray of light flashed. In the distance, the middle-aged man's expression changed. He pressed his right hand forward, and in an instant the space in front of him began to compress, forming a thick spatial barrier. At this moment the sword arrived. The spatial barrier was instantly pierced through, and the sword pierced through the middle-aged man's forehead. The middle-aged man's body stiffened. He looked ahead in disbelief as if he wanted to say something. Yi Xian and the Sovereign Hound were dumbfounded as well. That was an instant kill? At this moment, the sword flew in front of Yi Xian. It got very close to Yi Xian, and after a moment, it lightly tapped Yi Xian's shoulder. Then, it turned into a sword light and disappeared into the horizon. Gone? Yi Xian was stunned. It ran away? No. Yi Xian seemed to have thought of something, and he hurriedly called Xiao Ling'er over. Yi Xian said, "Do you know where it went?" Xiao Ling'er moved closer to Yi Xian, and then she leaned against Yi Xian's ear and said softly, It said it went to look for help." Look for help? Yi Xian was stunned. Look for who? In the next moment, Yi Xian's entire body trembled. Bling. Who else could it be? It definitely went to look for the woman in a plain dress. But, who's in the pagoda? Yi Xian hurriedly immersed his consciousness into his body. The 5th level of the pagoda had returned to calm, and there wasn't a single sound from it. Yi Xian's face was extremely gloomy. He knew that the 5th level had almost been knocked out. It was the sword that had suppressed it, but it wouldn't be able to do so for long. Otherwise, it wouldn't have gone to look for help. It was very serious. More serious than before. At this moment, the Emperor Dog came to his side. "Kid, what's the situation?" Yi Xian shook his head with a wry smile. "The situation is very bad. Not only did he have powerful enemies on the outside, but he also had a super powerful enemy on the inside. How terrifying was the 5th level if even the sword was wary of it?" Yi Xian shook his head and stopped thinking about this problem. He walked up to the middle-aged man, and with a wave of his right hand, the middle-aged man's storage ring was directly taken by him. Then he carried Yi Ling'er and leaped onto the Emperor Dog's back. Yi Xian and the Emperor Dog were about to leave when a figure suddenly appeared in front of them. The figure was the god on the 2nd floor. The god on the 2nd floor stared at Yi Xian. What just happened? Yi Xian recounted what had just happened. The god on the 2nd floor said solemnly, "Let's go first." Saying so, she directly entered the pagoda. The Emperor Dog leaped into the air and disappeared into the boundless horizon. Not long after the Emperor Dog and Yi Xian left, more than a dozen people suddenly appeared on the scene. The leader was a middle-aged man in a purple robe. The middle-aged man stared at the horizon and said softly, "He actually died. It seems that this Yi Xian still has a trump card that we don't know about." Behind the middle-aged man, an old man said solemnly, "This person is really not simple. This time we have suffered heavy losses." The man in purple robe said softly, "Do you want to give up?" The old man said solemnly, "Our Huangfu family's patriarch is already dead. The person that was killed by the sword was the Huangfu family's patriarch." The man in purple robe chuckled. "Then all the more we should take revenge, right?" The old man was silent. The man in purple robe turned to look at the old man and said with a smile, "As far as I know, the Huangfu family's patriarch is still alive. If he learns that his son has died, what do you think he will do? The old man looked at the man in purple robe. You want to use my Huangfu family? The man in purple robe shook his head. That's not true. Without your Huangfu family we will still continue to pursue. However, is your Huangfu family really willing to give up? Not only did you lose 4 Saint Realm experts but even the patriarch is dead. The old man was silent. The man in purple robe said with a smile, Huangfu Xian, you can't make the decision on your own. Inform the Huangfu family's patriarch. With that, he directly disappeared. Not long after the man in purple robe left, a white-bearded old man suddenly appeared. Huangfu Xian hurriedly bowed when he saw the white-bearded old man. Patriarch. This person was the previous patriarch of the Huangfu family, Huangfu Shao. Huangfu Shao said softly, my Huangfu family shouldn't have gotten involved in this mess. Huangfu Xian said solemnly, Patriarch, we have underestimated this Yi Xian. Huangfu Shao shook his head slightly, tell everyone to return and not get involved in this matter. Huangfu Xian hesitated for a moment and said, Patriarch Huangfu Shao said coldly, do you think they really want to cooperate with us? The old man finally understood. They just want to use us to force Yi Xian to reveal his trump card. They want to see Yi Xian's trump card but they don't want to test it themselves. That's why they came to us. If this continues, then it won't just be the deaths of a few Saint Realm experts, but the annihilation of the entire family. Huangfu Xian's expression changed. Annihilation of the entire family? But Huangfu Shao said, you think it's impossible? Huangfu Xian fell silent. Huangfu Shao said, these people's origins are unknown, and their strength is unfathomable. However, they're so afraid of this Yi Xian. It's obvious how extraordinary this Yi Xian is. As he spoke, he looked towards the horizon and said softly, this game of chess is too big. My Huangfu family can't afford to play it. Perhaps it's not too late to stop now. If this continues, then the Huangfu family will probably vanish from this world. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. Huangfu Xian sighed softly and left as well. On an island in the distance, a purple-robed middle-aged man looked ahead quietly. No one knew what he was thinking. At this moment, a black-robed old man suddenly appeared in front of him. The black-robed old man bowed slightly. Human sovereign, the Huangfu family has chosen to withdraw. Human sovereign smiled slightly. This Huangfu Shao has seen it clearly. The black-robed old man said, should we annihilate them? Human sovereign shook his head. There's no need. They won't hinder us. Moreover, if we annihilate the Huangfu family, it will alarm Weiyang Palace. That palace lord is invincible. The black-robed old man said, according to this subordinate's previous investigation, that palace lord seemed to have secretly helped this Yi Xian in Weiyang City. However, this subordinate has yet to find out why she would help this Yi Xian. Human sovereign said, there's no need to investigate. Now that Yi Xian has left Weiyang City, it means that she won't interfere. The black-robed old man said in a deep voice, previously when the Huangfu family head was killed, this subordinate has yet to find out who did it. Human sovereign smiled lightly, I told him to wait for me but he acted on his own. Obviously he wanted to kill Yi Xian and take the treasure for himself. Unfortunately, he didn't expect that this Yi Xian still had a trump card. People shouldn't be too greedy. Those who are too greedy usually don't have a good ending. As he spoke, he stood up. If I'm not wrong, this Yi Xian still needs 3 days to reach Burial Sky Great Wall, right? The black-robed old man nodded. According to that demonic beast's speed, it will take at least 3 days. Human sovereign said softly, we can't let him reach the territory of the Moke clan and Weiyang Palace. Otherwise we won't be able to interfere anymore. As he spoke, he turned to look at the black-robed old man. Until now, there hasn't been any movement from the Moke clan? The black-robed old man shook his head. No. Human sovereign smiled, you're wrong. The black-robed old man gazed at the human sovereign, and the human sovereign smiled. If I'm not wrong, then they've been paying attention to Yi Xian for a long time. However, if Weiyang Palace doesn't make a move, then they won't. The black-robed old man was puzzled. Why? Human sovereign smiled. If Weiyang Palace doesn't make a move, then they wouldn't dare to as well. Because this is Weiyang Starfield and it's Weiyang Heaven's territory. However, if Weiyang Heaven does make a move, then they'll definitely stop at nothing to seize the treasure or kill. As he spoke, he slowly closed his eyes. They're keeping each other in check and this is our opportunity. Yi Xian. Oh Yi Xian. Let me see exactly what trump cards you have. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly vanished. At the same time, a voice resounded, "Send the three of them to meet him." The black-robed old man bowed slightly, "Yes." As soon as he finished speaking, he vanished on the spot. Chapter 444. Far away on the sea, the Emperor Hound carried Yi Xian as it ran. At this moment, the Emperor Hound's speed had reached its limit. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the Emperor Hound's back, his hands on his knees as he madly absorbed purple origin crystals. Healing. He had used up a lot of energy in the previous battle, especially when he had activated the prison pagoda. Although he had not fully activated it, it had affected him to a certain extent. The Emperor Hound suddenly said, "Kid, is there something coming out of your body?" Yi Xian nodded. The Emperor Hound said, "Is it hard to deal with?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Deal. If it was easy to deal with, the sword would not have left." Now that the sword had left, there were 3 less swords in the pagoda. He did not know what would happen. The woman in the plain dress. He had to admit that he missed the woman in the plain dress a little. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian's face darkened. Dependence. In that instant, he had thought that if the woman in the plain dress had come, she would have been able to resolve this crisis. That was the truth. However, Yi Xian could not rely on the woman in the plain dress. He would not allow himself to rely on others. Once a person became dependent, they would become lazy. Everything depended on oneself. Yi Xian took a deep breath. He opened his palm and a sword appeared in his hand. It was the celestial spirit sword. Looking at the sword in his hand, Yi Xian smiled slightly. "I have to rely on myself." The Emperor Hound suddenly said, "Kid, you are ambitious. In that case, can you let me go?" Yi Xian's face darkened. The Emperor Hound suddenly laughed loudly. "Kid, if you don't have any other way out, I have one. Do you want to hear it?" Yi Xian said, "What way?" The Emperor Hound said, "Don't you have a way to hide your aura?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes. However, they have locked onto me, so I cannot use this secret technique." He had long wanted to use the primal chaos to conceal himself, but someone had been following him and the Monarch Hound closely. Therefore there was no point in concealing his aura now. The Emperor Hound said, "I have a way to put some distance between us to give you some time." Yi Xian looked at the Emperor Dog and asked, "What do you mean?" The Monarch Hound didn't say anything. Suddenly, it roared furiously, and in the next moment, its speed increased explosively. Everywhere it passed, space was torn apart. It was obvious to see how fast it was. The moment the Emperor Hound disappeared, a shadow suddenly flashed across the sky. Its speed was also extremely fast, but it was still slightly slower than the Emperor Hound. Soon, the distance between the Emperor Dog and the afterimage widened. 15 minutes later, the Emperor Hound stopped on an island. As soon as it stopped, it collapsed. Yi Xian's expression changed. Just as he was about to speak, the Emperor Hound suddenly said, "Hide. Don't waste time." After saying that, it slowly closed its eyes. Yi Xian didn't waste any time and directly stored the Emperor Hound in the prison pagoda. In the next moment, he used the primal chaos chi to completely conceal himself. At this moment, it was as if his entire person had disappeared into thin air. There was no aura at all. Less than 3 breaths after Yi Xian disappeared, a shadow suddenly flashed over Yi Xian's head. In the darkness below, Yi Xian didn't move. Not long after, the remnant figure suddenly retreated. His divine consciousness was like a giant net that enveloped the entire island. Yi Xian also sensed his opponent's divine consciousness. At this moment he even stopped breathing. At this moment he even held his breath. A moment later the divine sense disappeared, and the afterimage in the sky also disappeared. But Yi Xian still didn't choose to leave. About half an hour later, several black shadows suddenly flashed across the sky. Each of the black shadows had an extremely powerful aura. At the very least they were above the Saint Realm. Sensing this, Yi Xian's expression became extremely solemn. Who the hell wanted to mess with him? Such a big battle formation. Just like this, after the sky turned dark, Yi Xian quietly left the place. But this time he didn't choose to use sword kinesis flight in the sky. Using sword kinesis flight now was undoubtedly courting death. Take the water route. Yi Xian dived into the sea and slowly moved forward. He didn't dare to go too fast. Those people in the dark were not ordinary people. If he made a little movement, he was afraid that he would be noticed. Although it was a little slow, safety was the most important. Somewhere in the sky, a purple-robed middle-aged man stood in the air. This person was the mysterious human king. In front of him there were 4 shadows. These 4 shadows were faintly discernible and extremely strange. After a moment, the human king suddenly said, "Completely disappeared?" In front of him a shadow nodded, disappeared without a trace, without any aura. The corner of the human king's mouth slightly raised. Interesting. The shadow said in a deep voice, Human king, what should we do now? The human king said with a smile, his goal is to go to the Great Sky Burial Wall. And to enter the Great Sky Burial Wall, he must go through the burial gate. That is the only way to the Great Sky Burial Wall. You go there first and wait for him. The four shadows nodded slightly, and in the next moment, they disappeared into thin air. The human king turned to the side, Go to the stargazing gate and say that I want to borrow the heart-viewing mirror. Forget it, I will go personally. As his voice fell, he turned and took a step forward. With this step, his whole person disappeared. Under the sea, Yi Xian found a cave at the bottom of the sea. He sat down cross-legged and directly entered the prison pagoda. In the first floor, the emperor hound was lying on the ground with its eyes closed. Its aura was still there, but he found that the emperor hound's body had shrunk. Needless to say, the emperor hound must have used some secret technique or divine ability. Now it was also suffering from a backlash. At this time, Soul's voice suddenly sounded, Young lord, don't worry. It is only in a deep sleep, it is not a big deal. Yi Xian said softly, Soul, were the Nether clan very strong in the past? Soul said, very strong. If young lord was in the Nether clan, you would only be considered average, no, only average. Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. I didn't ask you that. Soul said, Oh. After a moment, Yi Xian said, Why am I only considered average in the Nether clan? Soul said softly, Because the martial arts civilization is different. The Nether clan's martial arts civilization is much higher than this star field's. Just like young lord, you have barely come into contact with laws, divine abilities and innate divine abilities. As for secret techniques, ancient spirit methods as well as the laws of earth, heaven, starry sky, and all things, young lord has not come into contact with them. And in the Nether clan, people are taught these knowledge from birth. Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. He really understood why the emperor hound was so arrogant. Because it was really powerful. Compared to them, this star field had already lost from the beginning. The environment. Many times the environment was too important. At this time Soul said, Young lord is also not bad. To be chosen by this pagoda, young lord must be outstanding, but I haven't found anything outstanding about young lord. Yi Xian's face was full of black lines. Soul, in your eyes I don't have any merits? Is that so? Soul was silent for a long time and then said, In fact, it's not that there aren't any. Yi Xian quickly asked, What merits? Soul said softly, Young lord is very thick-skinned, this is also considered a merit. Yi Xian's expression froze and after a moment he said seriously, Soul, no one talks like this. With that, he left the prison pagoda and continued forward. On the way, Soul suddenly said, Young lord, this starfield civilization is too low level, I suggest young lord go to a more civilized starfield. This way, young lord can come into contact with a higher civilization's martial arts, which is of great benefit to young lord. Yi Xian shook his head, I still haven't understood the martial arts of this star field. Soul said softly, That's true. Yi Xian suddenly asked, The Nether race and the God race are such powerful martial arts civilizations, why did they disappear? Soul said, There is always a sky beyond the sky, there is no strongest, only stronger. Yi Xian shook his head with a smile, The martial arts, there is no limit. Soul said, That's right, the martial arts road has no end. Just like before, I thought it was the world's most powerful sword. But now, Yi Xian said with a smile, Is it because of those 3 swords at the top of the pagoda? Soul said, Yes, but I'm not bad, I will work hard to surpass them. Yi Xian said with a smile, You have ambition, let's work hard together. With that, Yi Xian gradually sped up. 3 days later, Yi Xian went ashore. In front of him was a mountain range that stretched as far as the eye could see, and from time to time, the roar of wild beasts could be heard. After passing through this mountain range, he would reach the Great Wall of Burial Heaven. Yi Xian looked around, but there was nothing around. But he knew that those people in the dark would certainly not give up like this. A moment later, Yi Xian quietly sneaked into the dense forest. As soon as he entered the dense forest, the sky suddenly darkened because the forest was so dense that not even sunlight could penetrate. In the dense forest, Yi Xian quietly sneaked, but soon his face became solemn. Because he found that the demon beasts in this mountain range were really strong. Not long after, he had already encountered several Sage Realm level demon beasts. This was not a good place. Yi Xian was more and more certain that this great wall of burial heaven was definitely not a good place. In order to avoid trouble, Yi Xian avoided those demon beasts along the way. About an hour later, Yi Xian came to a small river. He glanced at the river, and the next moment the entire river suddenly boiled. Just as Yi Xian's face changed and he was about to leave, the small river in front of him suddenly exploded. At this moment, a man rushed out from the bottom of the river, and he landed steadily on the shore, causing the entire ground to shake violently. In the man's right hand, there was also a demon beast's head dripping with blood. The man's upper body was bare and he wore tight-fitting cloth pants. But Yi Xian found that the man's upper body was covered in scars. At this moment, the man suddenly looked at Yi Xian, and when he saw Yi Xian, he was slightly stunned. Chi controlling realm? Are you kidding me? Yi Xian smiled slightly. Excuse me, how do I get to Great Wall of Burial Heaven? The man walked in front of Yi Xian and he sized up Yi Xian. You want to go to Great Wall of Burial Heaven? Yi Xian nodded. The man said seriously, are you sure you're not here to be funny? Yi Xian. P.S. I'm sorry I did something stupid today. I moved the internet but not the computer. I have a desktop and I can't connect to the internet with my phone, so I had to quickly move the computer. I'm really sorry. I won't be so stupid again. Chapter 445. The man sized up Yi Xian again. Suddenly he frowned. You have some skills. Only then did he realize that Yi Xian in front of him had no aura at all. He couldn't feel it at all. Yi Xian smiled. How should I address you, sir? The man said, War Army. Yi Xian smiled. Yi Xian. The War Army said, Yi Xian. Are you hiding your realm or? Yi Xian smiled. Hiding my realm. The War Army nodded slightly. No wonder. Brother Yi, did you just come from Never-Ending City? Yi Xian nodded. Just arrived. The War Army smiled. Let's go. I'm about to go back too. With that said, he turned and walked into the distance with Yi Xian. On the way, the War Army suddenly said, Brother Yi, have there been any geniuses in Never-Ending City recently? Yi Xian smiled. Why do you ask? The War Army shook his head and sighed. Because there have been fewer and fewer people coming to the Great Wall of Burial Sky in the past 2 years. Yi Xian asked, Are you training here? The War Army shook his head. Not really. Yi Xian asked, Why do you say so? The War Army pointed into the distance. Over there is the Moke clan's place. Have you heard of the Moke clan? Yi Xian nodded. A little. The War Army said softly, You will soon see how terrifying they are. This clan is a group of battle maniacs, and their goal is to conquer Never-Ending Star Domain. Yi Xian frowned slightly. Conquer Never-Ending Star Domain? The War Army nodded. This is the final barrier. If we lose it, they will march straight into the Never-Ending Star Domain. That will be a disaster for the Never-Ending Star Domain. Yi Xian said in a low voice, Don't the people of Never-Ending Star Domain know? The War Army said softly, I know. Every year many people come from there. They are all geniuses from various forces. But in the past 2 years there have been fewer people. As he spoke, he shook his head and laughed. I heard that a genius appeared in the Moke clan called Wuxia. This person has already rushed to the Great Wall of Burial Sky. When that time comes, this place will definitely be very lively. Yi Xian asked, Won't the experts of the older generation participate? The War Army said with a smile, Of course not. It's just that this is not the final battle. Therefore, both sides have an agreement to let the younger generation of both sides have some fun. Actually, it's a kind of training. Both sides are training their soldiers. Of course, it's to see which side's soldiers are stronger. As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. Brother Yi, no matter how monstrous you are outside, when you come here, remember one thing. There is no most monstrous genius here, only more monstrous geniuses. Especially don't look down on anyone, especially people from the Moke clan. Yi Xian nodded slightly. Thank you for the reminder. The War Army smiled and was about to speak when he and Yi Xian suddenly stopped. The ground beneath their feet was shaking. Yi Xian frowned and looked into the distance. At that moment, the War Army said in a low voice, Demon beasts are approaching here. Yi Xian was just about to say retreat when the War Army said excitedly, Let's go and see. Yi Xian was speechless. Just like that, the War Army took Yi Xian and rushed forward. After a while, Yi Xian's expression gradually became dignified because there were deep and huge footprints on the ground where they passed. It was not an ordinary demon beast. The War Army took a closer look at the footprints and soon, his expression became dignified. "What's wrong?" asked Yi Xian. The war army said in a deep voice, "It should be a violent beast. I can't beat it alone." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. "Are you interested?" Yi Xian asked, "What are the benefits of fighting this thing?" The war army smiled and said, "There are great benefits. First, their blood and nidin can strengthen our bodies. Here, only strong strength can allow us to survive. Second, their skin can be exchanged for a lot of purple source crystals. Because we need to consume a lot of purple source crystals every day, we can improve our strength better with purple source crystals." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Xian. "This violent beast is at the peak of the sage realm. Its combat power is extremely strong. Its blood and nidin are great supplements. Its skin can be sold for at least 100,000 purple source crystals. 100,000 purple source crystals." The corner of Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. Originally he was still interested, but now he basically had no interest. Although he had sent most of the purple source crystals to Azure Firmament World, he still had at least 10 million purple source crystals on him. Therefore he was not short of money. The war army suddenly said, "Brother Yi, if I'm not wrong, you should have brought a lot of purple source crystals with you when you came, right?" Yi Xian did not hide it. "Yes, I have some." The war army laughed. "Let me tell you, very soon, you will not even have a single strand of hair on your body." Yi Xian was puzzled. "Why?" The war army smiled and said, "Because the consumption here is very high. Moreover, we need a lot of purple source crystals for our daily cultivation because there is no spirit energy on Burial Sky Great Wall. If we want to cultivate, we can only rely on purple source crystals." Yi Xian said solemnly, "The never-ending starfield does not provide help?" The war army said softly, "Of course they do. Everyone gets some allowance every month, but not much. This is because Burial Sky Great Wall has a huge array that requires hundreds of millions of purple source crystals to maintain every month. Also, in short, there are too many places to spend purple source crystals. Therefore, most of the time we can only rely on ourselves." Yi Xian said softly, "Is the Moke clan very strong?" The war army smiled bitterly. "Not very strong, but very strong." Saying that, he looked at Yi Xian. "Brother Yi, how about it? Have you thought it through? Let's get rid of this violent beast together." Yi Xian smiled. "Then let's give it a try." The war army laughed. "Let's go." After saying that, he rushed forward at an extremely fast speed. Yi Xian hurriedly followed. Soon the two arrived outside a dense forest. In the distance the two saw a giant beast by the river. This giant beast was like a small mountain drinking water by the river. Looking at this size, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth twitched slightly. "This is too big." Zhang Jun suddenly leaped, and like an arrow released from a bow, he directly collided with the nearby violent beast. Yi Xian was stunned. This guy attacked just like that. He was about to make a move, but suddenly he looked down at the ground. The next moment his expression changed. At this moment, the violent beast in the distance suddenly turned around, and the next moment, it slammed its palm toward the war army. The war army did not dodge and blasted a punch. Boom. With a loud explosion, the war army retreated several hundred feet. After he stopped, he was about to make a move. At this moment, the ground around him suddenly cracked. Soon, 3 beasts the size of the violent beast climbed up from the ground. They were all in the sage realm. Seeing this scene, the war army's expression suddenly changed. He was ambushed. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly appeared beside him. Seeing Yi Xian, the war army was stunned and then said, "You're not running?" Yi Xian did not come out just now. He could have run away. Yi Xian smiled and said, 3 against 1, you're dead for sure. 3 against 2, we still have some hope. What do you think?" The reason why he did not run was naturally because he felt that this war army was a good person. If he ran away at this time, it would be a bit immoral. The war army glanced at Yi Xian. "You're quite an interesting guy." Yi Xian smiled and then looked at the violent beast in front of him. At this moment, the violent beast was also staring at him. Yi Xian opened his palm and a sword appeared in his hand. The war army was slightly stunned. "Brother Yi, are you a swordsman?" Yi Xian nodded. The war army was about to speak, but at this moment, the violent beast in the distance suddenly leaped. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian and the war army's expression changed, and the two of them flashed backward. Boom. The violent beast landed on the ground, and the place where the two of them were originally standing collapsed. At this moment, several sword flashes directly slashed its body. Chi. The sword flashes directly tore open a few wounds on the violent beast's body, and blood splattered everywhere. Yi Xian was about to continue attacking, but at this moment, the giant beast next to him suddenly slapped its palm over. When this palm fell, it was as if the sky had collapsed and it immediately darkened. The war army next to him stomped his right foot, and his whole body soared into the sky. In the air, the war army punched the giant beast's palm. Boom. The giant beast immediately retreated, but the war army also directly smashed to the ground, creating a huge deep pit. On their right, another giant beast suddenly rushed toward them. Every time this giant beast landed, the ground trembled violently. It was extremely terrifying. The war army suddenly said, "These two little ones and the old one, which one do you want to fight?" Yi Xian looked at the violent behemoth in front of him. "Leave this one to me." As soon as he finished speaking, he disappeared. The next moment, several sword chi suddenly slashed the violent behemoth's body, and for a moment, countless streams of blood splattered from the violent behemoth's body. Because the speed of Yi Xian's flying swords was too fast, the violent behemoth could not stop them at all. Therefore, it directly abandoned defense and then slapped Yi Xian in the air. This palm was extremely powerful, and as it swept across, the surrounding space trembled violently as if it was about to collapse. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. He did not choose to fight head-on because he absolutely could not. He decisively dodged this powerful blow, and at the same time he gently slashed forward. In an instant, countless sword chi slashed the violent behemoth's body from various angles. For a moment, several streams of blood splashed from the violent behemoth's body. Guerrilla warfare. Yi Xian kept dodging in the air. Every time he dodged, his flying swords could cut a few wounds on the violent behemoth's body. In just a short while, the violent behemoth's body had already been cut dozens of times. About 15 minutes later, the violent behemoth suddenly roared angrily. Thinking that the other party was angry and was about to use a big move, Yi Xian's expression changed. He was about to dodge, but at this moment, the violent behemoth suddenly turned around and ran. The other two demonic beasts also turned around and ran. Yi Xian was stunned. That Motherf Kerr ran away? Next to Yi Xian, the war army smiled bitterly. Your sword can break through its defense, but if it continues, it will definitely die. Even if it doesn't die, it will be seriously injured. Here, being seriously injured is equivalent to death, so it chose to run. At this point there was a sudden change. A beam of golden light suddenly appeared above their heads, and in the next moment, that beam of golden light directly enveloped Yi Xian. Soon, in the distant sky, the space trembled as if something was shuttling back and forth. Yi Xian's face sank. "Brother Zhan, you go first." As soon as his voice fell, four phantoms suddenly appeared in front of them. They were all above the Saint Realm. Seeing this scene, the war army's expression also changed. "Brother Yi, this is?" Yi Xian said, "My enemy, you go first." The war army said solemnly, "Brother Yi, do you think they will let me go?" Yi Xian smiled bitterly. "Sorry, I implicated you." The war army suddenly took out a talisman. The next moment, that talisman directly turned into a golden light and soared into the sky. Yi Xian was puzzled. "This is?" The war army said, "Call more people." Yi Xian thought for a while and then said, "Please call more people. Otherwise I will panic a little." The war army. Chapter 446. The four phantoms in front of Yi Xian did not make a move. They seemed to be waiting for something. Beside Yi Xian, the war army suddenly asked, "Brother Yi, what faction are they from?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't know." The war army was about to speak when a middle-aged man in a purple robe appeared in front of them. It was the human lord. The human lord was holding a pure white mirror in his hand. The main character was here. Yi Xian clenched his right fist, and the mystic chi in his body began to circulate. The human lord looked at Yi Xian and smiled. "I have to say your concealment technique is indeed impressive. If I hadn't borrowed the mind visualization from the stargazing sect, I wouldn't have been able to find you." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "How should I address you, Your Excellency?" The human lord smiled. "They all like to call me human lord. As for our origins, I can only tell you that we are not from the never-ending star domain." As he spoke, he walked to a spot not far from Yi Xian and said, "Yi Xian, hand over that treasure and I will leave your corpse intact. How about that?" Yi Xian smiled. "I thought you would say that you would let me live if I hand over that treasure." The human lord shook his head. "You are truly a monster. People like you will be a huge problem if they grow up. So, I have to kill this trouble here." Yi Xian was silent as if he was considering it. The human lord suddenly shook his head and smiled. Are you still trying to stall for time? At that moment, a phantom beside him suddenly whispered something. Soon the human lord looked at the war army beside Yi Xian. Are you from the Great Wall of Sky Burial? The war army nodded. The human lord smiled. This has nothing to do with you. You may leave now. The war army looked at Yi Xian and Yi Xian smiled. Brother Zhan, you may leave first. The war army was silent. Yi Xian smiled and said, this is my personal matter. I'm already very sorry for dragging you into this. There's really no need for you to stay here because it's meaningless. The war army was silent for a moment and then said, take care. With that, he turned around and disappeared into the distance. Yi Xian looked at the human sovereign. The human sovereign smiled and said, look, this world is very realistic. Yi Xian smiled and said, I think it's very normal. This is my personal matter. Why should I let others die with me? Human sovereign nodded slightly. Your mentality is not bad. As he spoke, the shadow behind him suddenly vanished, and then a rift was torn open in the space here. The moment the phantom disappeared, Yi Xian's expression changed. He clenched his right hand and 5 chi swords quietly condensed in front of him. The next moment, the 5 chi swords ruthlessly slashed down. Boom. An explosion suddenly resounded, and then the 5 chi swords directly shattered. Yi Xian retreated rapidly, and while he was retreating, several more shadows quietly appeared around him. Danger. At this moment, Yi Xian smelled the scent of death. He didn't dare to be careless. Yi Xian stomped his right foot and directly put on the god set. At the same time, he suddenly drew his sword and slashed. Draw the sword to decide life and death. The sword slashed down and the shadow in front of him was instantly slashed back. However, Yi Xian felt several powerful forces blasting his body. Boom. Yi Xian was directly sent flying. At this moment he felt like his entire body was about to collapse. Just as he was about to stop, the shadows appeared around him again. A black sword suddenly appeared in Yi Xian's hand. The next moment he held the sword and slashed horizontally. A black sword light violently vibrated. Not far away, the human king's voice suddenly rang out, retreat. As soon as the word fell, the 4 shadows around Yi Xian suddenly disappeared. When they appeared again, they were already behind the human king. Yi Xian's sword missed. The human king glanced at the sword in Yi Xian's hand and softly said, this sword of yours. Amazing. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and grinned, is that so? The human king suddenly disappeared. In the distance, Yi Xian suddenly slashed down with his sword. Boom. As soon as the sword fell, Yi Xian's entire body was directly sent flying. In the distance, the human king faintly smiled, killing a genius is quite a sense of accomplishment. As he spoke, he was about to attack again, but at this moment, his brows suddenly furrowed. He looked behind Yi Xian. There, 6 people were rushing over and the one leading them was the war army. Seeing this scene, the human king's eyes suddenly slightly narrowed. The war army rushed in front of Yi Xian. He glanced at Yi Xian who was lying on the ground. Brother Yi, are you still breathing? Yi Xian was just about to speak when blood suddenly flowed from his mouth. He smiled bitterly. This time he really was beaten to the point where he couldn't fight back. At this time, Soul's voice suddenly rang out, young lord, don't belittle yourself. This person's strength far exceeds yours. He has already surpassed the manifestation realm. He is simply not someone you can match. Yi Xian was silent. No matter what, this time he was bullied badly. Not far away, the human king glanced at the war army and the others. These people were all in the sage realm. The geniuses buried in the Great Wall. The human king looked at the war army. Your Excellency, what do you mean? Next to the war army, a bald man suddenly said, Dog army, didn't you say that they are all in the sage realm? This is the F*King sage realm? They are all in the manifestation realm. As he spoke, he pointed at the human king not far away. This guy might be above the manifestation realm. You told us that they are all in the sage realm. If you have any dissatisfaction with us, just say it. You can't trick us like this. The war army smiled apologetically. There is no difference between the sage realm and the manifestation realm. The bald man's face twitched. There is no difference? How can you say that? Not far away, the human king suddenly said, Everyone, our target is only this Yi Xian. Please leave. He didn't dare to kill these geniuses of the Great Wall of Sky because doing so would be equivalent to angering the entire never-ending starfield. After all, most of these geniuses came from the various major factions of the never-ending starfield. Killing these people was equivalent to directly confronting the never-ending starfield and never-ending palace. The war army glanced at the human king, then looked at the bald man beside him. Baldy, that guy is at least above the manifestation realm. Do you want to fight him? Baldy was silent for a moment, then said, War army, who is that guy lying on the ground? Is he worth our brothers risking their lives for? The war army smiled bitterly. I just met a guy called Yi Xian. When I was ambushed by 3 violent beasts, he didn't choose to escape. Instead, he stayed to help me. So, in terms of character, there should be no problem. Baldy asked in a low voice. I don't know him, but since you said you want to save him, then I will. With that, he took a step forward. The next moment, a huge pitch-black ruler suddenly appeared in his hand. At the same time, he pointed a finger at his chest. In an instant, a powerful aura swept out of his body. Then he leaped up and landed directly on the human king's head. He slammed the ruler down. Sky-splitting ruler. The ruler fell and the world seemed to be split apart. Below, the human king was expressionless. He raised his hand and waved. Boom. Baldy instantly retreated 1,000 feet, but the human king didn't retreat a single step. However, on the back of his hand, there was a deep mark of a ruler. The human king glanced at the back of his hand, then looked at the nearby Baldy. He said softly, I have to say, the quality of the geniuses of this great wall of buried heavens is quite high. With that, he suddenly disappeared. In the distance, the expressions of Baldy and the others changed. In the next moment, the 6 of them rushed out. The human king's eyes gradually turned cold. In the next moment, he spread out his palm and pressed it forward. In an instant, the space in front of him rippled like a wave. In front of him, Baldy and the war army were instantly pushed back by this powerful force. The bodies of Baldy and the war army directly cracked, and blood splattered everywhere. The human king's eyes were filled with killing intent. He didn't choose to hold back anymore. He once again rushed towards Baldy and the war army. At this moment, the sound of a flute suddenly came from the side. In the next moment, the space in front of the human king exploded. The human king stopped and turned to look. Not far away, a middle-aged man in a white robe was slowly walking over. In the middle-aged man's right hand was an emerald-green flute. Seeing this middle-aged man in white, the human king's face instantly darkened. The white-robed middle-aged man stopped not far from the human king. He looked at the human king and the others. Scram. The human king was about to speak, but at this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared behind the human king and the others. In the next moment, 2 illusory figures' heads were directly sent flying. Blood spurted out like a fountain. The human king stared at the white-robed middle-aged man. I guess you must be the famous Mr. Bai. The white-robed middle-aged man looked at the human king. Not Scram? As his voice fell, a ghostly black shadow suddenly appeared not far behind the human king and the others. This black shadow was holding a long blood-red sickle in his hand. The human king was silent for a moment. Then he looked at Yi Xian, who was lying on the ground not far away. We will meet again. As his voice fell, he and the 2 illusory figures behind him directly disappeared. Mr. Bai turned to look at Baldy and the others not far away. 3 months of salary forfeiture, 1 month of cleaning the Great Wall. The faces of Baldy and the others immediately became bitter. Beside them, the war army said weakly, Mr. Bai, did we do something wrong? Mr. Bai glanced at the war army. The latter smiled awkwardly. I'm just asking. It's okay if you don't want to say, Mr. Bai said. Your duty is to guard the Great Wall of Burial Sky. Baldy hurriedly pointed at Yi Xian on the ground. He also belongs to our Great Wall of Burial Sky. Mr. Bai glanced at Yi Xian and said indifferently, he hasn't entered the Great Wall of Burial Sky yet. So he doesn't count now. As he said this, he looked at the war army. Are you dissatisfied with my punishment? The war army hurriedly shook his head. No. I'm very satisfied, very satisfied. Mr. Bai said, after he wakes up, let him go to Golden Palace and not come out for a month. As he said this, he quietly disappeared with the illusory figure not far away. Golden Palace. In the field, Baldy and the others looked at each other and then looked at Yi Xian on the ground. In their eyes, there was pity and a trace of schadenfreude. Chapter 447. After Mr. Bai left, the war army and the others carried Yi Xian away. After the war army and the others left, the human king who had left earlier appeared once again. Looking in the direction where Yi Xian and the others had left, the human king's expression was frighteningly gloomy. In the end, Yi Xian still entered the Great Wall of Burial Skies. But now he could not do anything. Because even he could not deal with the Great Wall of Burial Skies. Moreover, if he continued to attack, he would not only have to face Yi Xian alone, but also the entire never-ending starfield. In the same place, the human king was silent for a moment before he said softly, "Those above the Saint Realm cannot attack." "That's good. I want to see if Yi Xian is really invincible among those of the same level." As soon as he finished speaking, his entire body disappeared. After the human king disappeared, a black shadow carrying a sickle suddenly appeared not far away. The black shadow looked up at the end of the horizon and was about to give chase when a voice suddenly sounded. "Don't chase after him." The black shadow nodded slightly, turned around and disappeared. The scene returned to normal. After an unknown period of time, Yi Xian felt pain all over his body. At that moment, a voice sounded in his ear. "You're awake." Yi Xian endured the pain all over his body and sat up. However, as soon as he sat up, the tearing feeling in his body made him gasp. Beside Yi Xian, the war army said, "Don't move first. Your entire body has been shattered. You need to recover." Yi Xian smiled bitterly. This time his injuries were really serious. Without thinking much, he took out some purple source crystals and began to devour them. As the energy of the purple source crystals entered his body, his injuries began to slowly heal. The war army said in a low voice, "Brother Yi, who were those people just now?" Yi Xian shook his head. "I don't know either." The war army said, "From now on, if there is nothing else, go to the Great Wall of Burial Skies." He was also wary of the strength of the human king and the others just now. Yi Xian nodded. "I won't go out for the time being." As he spoke, he looked around. This is the Great Wall of Burial Sky?" The war army smiled and said, "Yes, now you are in my stone house. After you recover, you can go out and see the Great Wall of Burial Heaven." As he spoke, he picked up the broom at the side and said, "I still have something to do. You recover first." After that, he carried the broom and left the stone house. Inside the stone house, Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground in silence. The previous battle had made him understand that his current strength was far from enough. That's because the ones who attacked him were likely some old monsters. Moreover, his intuition told him that with the existence of this pagoda, his future enemies would only grow stronger. Not only that, but there was also a huge problem within the tower, especially the 5th floor. The 5th floor really wanted to kill him. And the best way to deal with the 5th floor was to find the Dao Law and use it to suppress the 5th floor. The problem was that he had no clue where to find the 5th Dao Law. Where could he find it? At the thought of this, Yi Xian felt a headache coming on. As the woman in the plain dress had said, the prison pagoda had brought him endless benefits, but at the same time, it would also bring him endless troubles. Blessings and misfortunes were intertwined. Yi Xian shook his head and didn't think about this problem for the time being. His priority now was to heal his injuries. About 2 hours later, his body was slightly better. Looking at his body that still had some cracks, Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. The human king from before was really terrifying. An expert of this level was still not someone he could fight. Improve his strength. Yi Xian took a deep breath. He had to improve his strength as soon as possible. After resting for about an hour, Yi Xian slowly walked out of the stone house. He wanted to see the Great Wall of Burial Sky. After Yi Xian walked out of the stone house, a heat wave hit him in the face. It was very hot and his skin felt a burning pain. Apart from that, the heat wave also carried a lot of sand. What was this place? Yi Xian frowned and quickened his pace. Soon he came to the side of the city wall. He raised his head and saw a wasteland in the distance. He couldn't see the end of it. To his left and right, the city wall was like a huge dragon spiraling around, and he still couldn't see the end of it. Under his feet, it was 300 yards tall. Behind him were some scattered stone houses. There weren't many, only a few dozen. Not far behind the stone houses, he could faintly see some tombstones. There were quite a lot of them. Great Wall of Burial Sky? Yi Xian was silent. This Great Wall of Burial Sky was different from what he had imagined. It was very desolate and there was a sense of oppression. At this moment, a man walked to a place not far from Yi Xian. It was Baldy. The Baldy sized up Yi Xian and then he said, "Feeling better?" Yi Xian smiled faintly. "Better. Also, thank you for earlier." When Baldy and the rest came, he hadn't fainted yet. Therefore, he still remembered the person in front of him. Baldy said indifferently, "Go to Roland's Golden Palace to clean up. This is what Mr. Bai requested." Roland's Golden Palace? Yi Xian was stunned. "What place?" Baldy said, "You'll know when you get there." As he said that, he pointed to the right. "Walk 200 yards from here." After saying that, he turned and left. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Can I not go?" Baldy didn't even turn his head. "Sure, as long as you can defeat Mr. Bai. And that's right, those people who chased after you were chased away by Mr. Bai." Yi Xian. After a moment, Yi Xian shook his head and sighed. He then walked towards that whatever Roland's golden palace. Now that he couldn't beat them, he had to keep a low profile. Not long later, Yi Xian arrived. The so-called Roland's golden palace was simply too different from what he had imagined. The so-called Roland's golden palace was just a huge wooden shed. The top of the wooden shed was empty and there was a foul stench coming from inside. If it wasn't for the words Roland's golden palace written on the door, he would definitely think that he had come to the wrong place. At this moment, an elder walked out from inside and sized up Yi Xian. "You're the newcomer, Yi Xian?" Yi Xian nodded. "That's me." The elder said indifferently, "Clean up?" Yi Xian was a little confused. "Clean up what?" The elder pointed to the Roland's golden palace not far away. The feces of the demon beasts inside. Yi Xian's face instantly darkened. Clean up the feces of the demon beasts? Himself? The elder took a look at Yi Xian. "Why, you don't want to?" Yi Xian hurriedly nodded his head. The elder sneered. "Newcomer, let me give you a word of advice. Don't challenge the authority of Mr. Bai. Otherwise you will be very, very miserable." After saying that, he turned around and left. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Senior, please wait." As he said that, he hurriedly walked in front of the elder. The elder was expressionless. "What do you want?" Yi Xian took out a storage ring and handed it to the elder. He smiled. "I'm new here, so this is a small token of my appreciation. I hope that Senior will accept it." The elder took a glance at the storage ring and said coldly, "Are you trying to bribe me?" Yi Xian said solemnly, No, definitely not. This is just a small token of appreciation from Junior, a small token of appreciation." The elder looked at Yi Xian and his eyes gradually turned cold. "What kind of person do you think this old man is?" Yi Xian thought for a moment and then took out another storage ring. There were 200,000 purple origin crystals in it. The old man flew into a rage when he saw this scene, and he was just about to speak when Yi Xian took out another spatial ring. There were 500,000 purple origin crystals in the spatial ring. The elder was stunned. In the next moment, he silently put away the storage ring and said indifferently, "Old man, seeing that you are still injured, it is indeed not suitable for you to do such heavy work. Forget it, this old man will let others do it. However, you must remember that this old man is not opening a back door for you. This is just understanding that you are injured, understand?" Yi Xian hurriedly said, I understand. I will keep a very, very low profile during this period of time." The elder nodded slightly and turned around to leave. Yi Xian immediately breathed a sigh of relief. He lay down on the side and shook his head with a smile. The charm of money is indeed great. At this moment, Xiao Linger suddenly ran out. Yi Xian was stunned. Just as he was about to speak, Xiao Linger threw herself into his arms and said in a trembling voice, Fifth floor? Fifth floor?" Yi Xian frowned slightly. He sank his consciousness into his body and his face quickly darkened. The door to the 5th floor opened. Is he going to come out? Yi Xian was dumbstruck where he stood. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.